Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies and citizens, this joy to the world, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies and citizens, this joy to the world. I bring a message of the truth amidst a world full of lies. I graduated from learning lies to seek the truth. Indoctrinated to be too blind to see the proof. I once was lost, but now I'm found, so I shine light. And everywhere I go is darkness, so I shine bright.
Welcome to the season 2 finale. I'm WesBlaze, and this is Uncommon Ground episode 50, brought to you by the first ever Kingdom Crew Conference on Kingdom in Context. Joined here by the brother who put it together, the CEO of KIC Media. It's Sean Griffin, my brother.
WesBlaze, thanks for having me. I'm excited for the season finale of season 2. I mean, you've put some amazing work into these episodes, brother. Big congrats and hats off to you.
Much appreciated, man. Hey, round of applause in the chat one time for Sean, y'all. I think it's awesome that you organize this fun way to fellowship and unite the people. And I'm excited to see all the presentations. Really love what I've seen so far. So thank God for what you're doing, bro. Would you pull up well, you don't have to pull anything up, but y'all be sure to check out the recent uploads on Kingdom in Context. You'll find all the great content from some of the Kingdom fam, some of which will be joining us for this very show. That's right. It's the Kingdom Crew Conference Biblical Cosmology Panel, Roundtable Discussion, and Audience Q&A. How's that for a title? Say that 3 times fast, right? Some amazing guests coming through for us. I think we'll maybe take turns, maybe testifying about some of our experience, learning about biblical cosmology, maybe discussing some aspects of the creation model, and collectively taking some questions from the audience. So I'm fired up, but before we bring them in with our intro clip real quick, huge shout out and special thank you to everyone who has supported the show. It's been so fun sharing everything I've learned, and just the biggest blessing really has been finding out that you brothers and sisters are also edified by it and enjoy it too. So I praise God for the opportunity and for each and every one of you that have joined us for the journey. Thank you guys.
That's right.
Yes, sir. Sean, season 2 finale, bro. What do you think?
It's been a long time coming, and it's exciting, I should say, to hopefully bring a sense of clarity to everything we've been leading up to for the last several episodes of Uncommon Ground, just kind of really digging into the gospel of the kingdom and all the details that go along with it, because it's super intricately connected to where you would live, why you were created to live here. It is the wonderful uncommon ground we expect to all share in the future. So we're very excited about, if nothing else, just bringing to you a working definition for why we named the show what we named it. So we're excited.
Well said, fam. Yeah, absolutely. Myself included. But brother, without further ado, if you got that trailer queued up, we're going to bring in some awesome guests. Might have some surprise guests joining us here in a little bit. It's going to be a fun time.
There we go.
Our mission is to share far and wide the truth of God's creation and how each individual component of his creation
is utilized in his overall plan of salvation for man.
His overall plan of salvation for man. So many fun guests this season, so many awesome topics that were just fascinating, interesting to learn about, interesting to talk about, and it's been more than a blessing. Can't thank you guys enough. Can't thank God enough. We got Winter Studios Inc. in the house. Shout out Drew. We got J.O. here in the chat. Good to see you, bro. Country Dad is here. Richard Wright, Travis Weems, Carrie Ann Carson, Carrie M. Ancient Hope is here. Oops is here. I saw earlier. Tracy Jones, James Henry. Much love and shout out to everybody joining us. Thank you guys for making it out for the live. Tyler Porter, as always. What's happening, brother? Thank you guys. But brother, we got some other faces that might be on screen here with us. You want to bring some of them on?
We do.
Got Josh Keefe from Founded Earth Brothers.
Awesome to be here.
Thank you. You hacked our season finale last time, so
Yeah.
I had to let you join all the hackers that were here today. Mikhail Media, Michael Temperato, everybody. Give it up.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
What's happening, fam? You are welcome. The one and only Ken Heidebrecht from Hanging on His Words with the psychedelic background.
Yo. Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Episode 50. Yeah. Killing it, bros.
Child at your boy. And then Andrew LeClaire from outside the camp.
Hello.
Salute. Shalom.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Matthew Beavers.
What's up?
All 7 of them. Thank you for being here.
Welcome, Matthew.
Jonathan, one of 2 brothers that will be joining us from Anchored to Truth.
What's up, everybody?
Good to see you, bro. Domes, Kyle B, 2 of 2 from Anchored to Truth. Good to see you. Thank you for being here, brothers.
Shalom.
Glad y'all could make it.
Oh, yeah.
Got a big cast tonight. Might have some more joining us, like I said. But brothers, we wanted to look at a couple things here just in remembrance of the show of the season that we've done so far, season 2 of Uncommon Ground. And then maybe look at some discussion topics that could get us into some debate, maybe some friendly back and forth, maybe even just some fun, humble agreement. So it should be fun. What do we got on the slides, brother? Not too much, but wanted to leave some space for all the guests and Matthew Beaver's cat.
Yeah, on me.
I was like, what is that tail? Is that a Loch Ness monster coming up? Kingdom Crew Conference, everybody. The first ever, hopefully the first annual Kingdom Crew Conference 2023, brought to you by Kingdom in Context. Like I said earlier, y'all make sure and check out all the fun presentations. Pretty much all these guys here have been able to submit something, or they're here to join us today. Either way, we're grateful for their participation.
Absolutely.
And it's been awesome fellowship, and I'm grateful for you guys. So Kingdom Crew Conference, guys. And then we want to also let you guys know that here coming up Friday evening, I believe I'm at was it 6 p.m. I checked the schedule, tentative, but Spiritual Combat with the 12 Patriarchs is the 4th episode of Fight the Good Fight that I've made. It's a spiritual warfare series that I'm doing, and we're looking specifically at the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, doing a little bit of apologetics for that book. We're doing some apologetics for walking in the faith, in the obedience to the commandments that God has laid out for us, that coincidentally, it all fits together. It's all connected. Also is the key to spiritual warfare. So hate to give it all away, but you guys check that out for a more in-depth look at what the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs talks about. I'm really looking forward to it.
Wes, did you know that in the Mortal Kombat movie from 1994, they stole Ezekiel 18, where Yahweh says, "Your soul is mine"?
Did he? Oh, no, I didn't catch that. But yeah, that's right, isn't it? Yeah, it is going to be a Mortal Kombat theme. No gore, no blood and guts necessarily, but
yeah, Yahweh did it first.
That's right. Yeah, season premiere of that's right. Yeah, Honor of Kings is also coming up. I believe that's going to be Sunday.
Sunday.
In front of me, Sunday. That's right. And we will be covering the long overdue, the much awaited, much anticipated Book of Jasher is the episode that is going to be happening, and that's going to be with Ken Heidebrecht, Sean Griffin. Surprise, myself will also be included in that discussion, and a few other brothers. You have any other? Is it going to be a surprise, Sean, or you have any other announcements?
No. Pretty much everyone on the screen here is invited, and like you probably have seen from the messages, and we wanted to make it a round table because we want an open discussion on like a modern 21st century canon council. Right, just as in the same vein that the guys in the 2nd and 3rd century didn't have any authority to choose what was scripture, neither do we. But guess what? We're going to get together and talk about it. So we're going to,
Sean,
because
our council, Sean, is going to be a little nicer. I was thinking we call it the Council of Nice to See Ya.
I love it.
And nobody will be able to slap each other in the face over a
No
disagreement.
slappings.
No
No
slapping.
slap box competitions.
I was
And,
looking forward to it.
Ah,
Yeah. Yeah, so we are excited to kick that off, and that's actually going to be our plan, to have a new episode every month with a council of brothers at the round table, so to speak. So it's not just going to be Ken and I this season. Every episode we'll invite guests to join us to talk about what the scriptural precedents for how we would even consider choosing what is scripture and what is not, how the people in the past did it, and what might be the books that we look at, do they hold up or not to the scriptures that we do have and do know. So we're excited to do that. It's kind of a whole different format for season 4, and with a lot more interaction, and we think you'll be blessed by it.
yeah, it'll be a little bit of a hot topic just because there are some varying opinions on it. I don't know how everybody, on this particular cast feels about that particular book, but it's going to be fun, and hopefully we can manage to do so in humility and grace, because you know what they say, if you don't show grace to one another, when the members of the churches don't have grace for each other, you know what that's called? It's called gracism. And you don't want to be a gracist.
That's right. I heard that. No gracism in the house.
That's right. Appreciate you guys doing this. So that'll be fun. But yeah, we've already played that trailer. Season 2 finale. Here we are. We just wanted to kind of look back at the top 3 most viewed episodes. Is there one for season 1 first? Put it maybe second, I guess. No.
Oh, here it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, here it goes.
Yeah. So top 3 most viewed episodes. Will you tell the people what they're looking at and how many views we got, bro? Yeah.
So this the number 1 was our premiere episode for episode 1, season 1, Sky's the Limit, and that was fun. We talked about all the domes and historical quotes, evidences. It was a fun time. So that one we've it's growing still, which I'm surprised. That YouTube is letting it grow. Just like Ken Heidelberg's got a video on the firmament that's already hit 1 million views. So that's amazing.
Congratulations, by Ken.
And I've actually been talking to Ken about that over the past couple of years, because it's hit these weird growth spurts where it'll like jump up 200,000, then stop and jump up another 100,000. And so, maybe one of these videos will kick off in that regard in the future too. So the second most watched episode or season 1 video was Antarctica, episode 4, Ends of the Earth. One of my favorites, because I love how it validates the Book of Enoch so well, as far as some of the testimony we found from the Russian weather station in Antarctica. Also, number 3 was the alien deception, was episode 8. And so that's where, we talked about deception, propaganda, Vimanas. It was a great one.
It was. It's truly fun. And yeah, I've been blessed to see that the views continue to go up on some of those earlier episodes, for sure, because I feel like we've gotten better. So it's awesome to see that people are still appreciating that one. So, this might not be any indication of which ones people liked the most, but I have heard pretty frequently that people like to watch the ones that they enjoy most multiple times. I've heard several brothers say that. I've seen the first episode, 4 or 5 times. So
I think the reason why the top number 1 video, it's all about your hair, Wes. You have that ploofy hair. You can bring back that hairstyle.
I was going to say, you guys strayed away from your boy band theme on the thumbnail. You strayed away from that. That's what
we were, the Flat Street Boys.
Clickbait.
Nice.
Thank you, bro. Yeah, that was fun. But yeah, I think maybe social media, like when these links get spread around, like the link to the whole playlist was spread around through a meme one time. And I think that really helps. It might have helped Ken. I've seen his videos spread around a lot on different Facebook groups and whatnot. But in season 2 here that we're wrapping up today, we had the top 3 most viewed episodes. Number 1 being the second before last episode that we did. Number 48 was Mothership Babylon. And that's the topic I'm interested to discuss with you guys possibly here. That one took a lot of effort. I remember wanting to be real careful putting that one together because it was so much information and I wanted to hit all the right notes at the right time with it. But a lot of people responded well to it, and I still see it here. Just since the solar eclipse happened, that video has gone up 1,000 views, so it's still growing as well. Number 2 was planets, wandering stars. It's one of the number 1 questions people usually have is, what about those there luminaries that they call the planets, and how do they fit into this biblical cosmological model? Number 3 was the first episode of season 2, and that was episode 26, entitled What in the Heavens? And we had 6.3 thousand views so far on that. It's the 3rd most viewed episode of season 2. And I just got to say thank you to each and every one of you guys that hung out to watch that episode and added to that view count, because it means a lot to us to see that it's growing and people are catching on to what we're putting down. What do you think, John? Any other thoughts?
Hey, real quick, Wes, I'm just wondering, were you able to contact everybody? There's not anybody hanging out in the. There's not anyone hanging out in the Discord link, is there?
I have messaged everybody that.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Sorry, I just had this thought of they're all being subjected to that elevator music, and we'll never get to them. So.
As far
hopefully
as I
they see
know,
messages.
Right. Yeah. If you're watching and hanging out in the Discord, look at my message. You should see a StreamYard link. Apologies for the mix-up. We switched it over here at the last minute. We wanted to talk with Brother Matthew Jansen, who just earlier today had a beautiful presentation. I want to hear what you guys think about this. Would have loved to hear Brother Matthew. He was not able to join with us tonight. Prayers up for him. They've got an emergency going on, but I thought this was excellent. It was elegant. It was so humble and well put together. The background music was just a masterpiece on every take with it. And what do you guys think?
Yeah, it was awesome to me.
I thought so too.
Yeah, he's the guy for the job. We need more people like him with the way he speaks and the fruits of the spirit that he just exudes. We need people with that kindness, that putting this truth out there, because there's too many. Usually the people that are brave enough to talk are the ones that are like a little more rough at the way they present it, you know. And I was just at a film festival for the Origins Untold film, and the guy that allowed this to be the feature film, I mean, it won the best feature film at this festival. Mm-hmm. And he said the only reason I picked this film was because it wasn't pushy. It didn't force me to believe in that, and it wasn't one of those experiences where you go away from it feeling like you're dumb if you don't believe it. It just put the questions out there, and it gets you thinking. And so that was something he said. So I feel like putting content out there like that just gets people thinking. It's not forcing, you know, your belief on somebody or insulting in any way. So I thought that was cool that we have somebody like him now on the team putting this stuff out there.
Yes, absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, we also want to welcome to the stream Flat Out Insights has been able to join us. We got Chris Bailey as well as the Michael Solomon. Much love to you, brothers. Thank you for coming out.
Nice.
You're both muted. Can't hear you, Michael.
That's all right. Keep going. Keep rolling. Keep going. We were in Discord. We messed it up. So.
No, that's our bad, brother.
Okay,
Thank you all for the sorry for the mix up. Thank you for dealing with the confusion.
You bet.
We got it together. Good to see you guys. Yeah, so we were talking about this. Did anybody else have any other thoughts on Matthew Jansen's presentation? Because real quick, let me say, we had him as a guest in the later episodes of season 1. I want to say 21, 22, somewhere in there. And he was not actually completely on board with biblical cosmology. He wasn't like staunchly opposed to it. He's actually been a geocentrist for, I think he said 5 years plus. And so then since we've had him as a guest on our show, as y'all saw today, hopefully he has now come fully on board with the firmament model and is now a firmamentalist. But yeah, any other thoughts on this, guys?
Yeah, not only the way that he presents his material, but that's awesome. That's incredible. You guys have already stated that, but I think we fail to realize sometimes the power of a testimony. And really getting real with people. We get too involved with the facts and the, what is this, but we forget about that part that's important to people, and that's that connection. And man, a testimony is a powerful thing. So I really enjoyed it.
It was, and it was power packed full of those testimonies too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really moving. I was actually moved by the Spirit through that. Just hearing everybody have such a similar testimony to mine. It was so validating and just affirming for how I came to faith too, right? So to see all those people pouring their heart out for the truth that they came to, that brought them to Yahweh and his son, that was a beautiful thing. So well said,
Absolutely.
Brothers. Thank y'all for your thoughts. And I think Sean had to dip out so that we could allow everybody on screen. That's all right. We had some topics of discussion that I wanted to give you guys an option for, just so we have a guideline for some discussion. If we could, Ken Heidebrick, would you read off these options that we'll have for the topics today?
Yes, I can. The first one is 7 firmaments of heaven, geocentric, ends of the earth, luminaries, biblical underworld, New Jerusalem kingdom, and Mother Babylon, Satan's home.
Okay, so these are topics that we've done individual episodes on here on Uncommon Ground, but I was hoping maybe some of you brothers have seen the episodes that we did on these topics. If you haven't, that's okay, but that would make for some interesting conversation. If anybody that would like to would pick one of these topics and maybe share any opening thoughts you'd have about it, and it'll be kind of like a Jeopardy thing in that way. Who wants to pick the first topic? Okay, Chris. I saw your hand first, I think.
Yeah, so I've seen the episode from the Geos. I've seen a lot of the episodes, but the geocentric part, I wanted to make a quick mention of this. I've been geocentric since the early or the late 90s. Came about the late, let's say 95, 96, 97, right around there is when I came to geocentricity. I was actually taught at my high school. And I want to say this because, being in this for quite some time, we've seen, the Principle documentary, all those groups, Genesis, all of those things come to that. I will tell you this, being part of the geocentric camp for a long time, from our high school, we just just really quickly in that is that Ohio is the mecca where I'm from of geocentricity, and all the highest astronomy programs were actually ran by evangelical Christian men, such as Baldwin Wallace University, Cleveland State, as well as Case Western Reserve. So, and if you look those up, they're some of the highest. And the head of astronomy at those programs were all geocentric evangelical men. And I will tell you this, since the fullness of cosmology came in, that 2015-ish type realm, being in geocentricity, it was almost powerless. That it didn't bring people to the fullness of the truth of the word. Only having one piece of truth doesn't do what the full truth does. Just like in that testimony that you were talking about right there, that was earlier presentation. I will tell you, I've seen so much fruit, and we all probably have our fruit baskets pretty full. I know Rob Skiba, Robbie Davidson, a lot of these guys, when they've come to the fullness of cosmology and the testimonies of atheists and agnostics coming to full faith in the Word of God, in the Scriptures, in the Messiah, through that, I would put the fullness of biblical cosmology as a stronger apologetic than even creation ministries. And I don't say that lightly. I just say that the fruit basket of who we have been able to reach since 2015 of people coming into faith has been on a wider scale than just people preaching to the choir at the Ark Museum, at the Creation Museum, those types of things. And I'm not trying to throw shade. I see that this topic has been able to reach the world so much stronger because it's the fullness of creation. And when we have the fullness of creation, all these things start to break down, the understanding of the firmament, understanding of, all of these different topics underneath. And so I just wanted to throw that out and get that started in the realms of geocentricity, because it is probably the first place that a lot of people should absolutely start.
Wonderful. Yeah. I've seen a lot of brothers kind of gradually come into the firmament model and the fullness of understanding, as you said, by starting with geocentricity. And I think that's one of the easiest things to really observe with verifiable, observation, just so you can look and see that the sun and the moon are the ones that move. We obviously feel stationary, and they want to convince us that we can't trust those senses and those basic fundamental, verified observations. But that is a key entryway. You're right. It's like the gateway drug for flat Earth, right? Yep. Who else has any thoughts? What about the brothers from Anchored to Truth? You guys have any thoughts on geocentricity?
I can make a comment here. So when I was first learning about biblical cosmology, I realized when I was calling my family crazy, by the way, because I was introduced to the subject from my family, I kept calling them crazy. When they described it, sort of how you were hinting to when the last person was talking, it's interesting how really to believe in a biblical cosmology would merely be to believe what your senses tell you. Like, for example, you don't feel the earth move. You watch the stars, the sun, and the moon all revolve around the earth. It appears that we're geocentric, right? No one can at least disagree that that's how it looks. And so obviously then you're told so many times in your life that it's not, those aren't actually moving. That's not what causes the observation is the earth spinning under. And so I just always found that interesting because I used to call my family crazy. And then one day I just sort of realized, well, wait a second, they're kind of just, they believe that what their senses tell them is accurate, right? It looks geocentric, right? It doesn't, again, like so many of the different things claimed about how the earth, is tilted, wobbles, spinning, revolving, and then flying through, the galaxy with the sun. And so I just thought that was interesting, right? It looks that way. It probably is that way. And I just remember I was like, wait a second, maybe they aren't crazy.
I kind of have that same similar kind of background with that. Was looking at some of the observable truths and going through about 8+ years ago, trying to find that program with the stars where it goes back to infinity backwards and infinity forwards, or however far that computer system goes. And they said they found this issue where there was a missing day, and I was like, well, I'm interested. What's going on with this missing day? Maybe my faith will help me to answer this question. And then it kind of went back into in Joshua where the sun stood still in the sky, and back to Hezekiah where the sun went back a little bit. He said, hey, would you rather go forward or backwards? He's like, I think the bigger miracle is if I can watch it go backwards. And so we can see some of these Bible stories that don't allow for the current scientific answer to work. It says we're spinning so fast that if it ever stopped, the whole earth would burn up, we'd all disintegrate, everything would be thrown off its axis, it would just be one big giant lava field. But yet those events happen, they're real, they've been accounted for. And even NASA's, going through their star system has proven that there's some missing dates, some missing time in there. So to see the answers actually played out at the same time, to watch the Bible become even more true, it just made the whole story even better for me. It made me want to dig more into this, and made me want to see how much more does the Bible have to offer. And so far, the more we've dug, the more we've learned, and the more that the Bible's been validated.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we heard repeatedly through the different testimonies, and even from Brother Matthew earlier during his presentation, was that it made the word and the Bible, the setting of this whole story, come to life. And those words are just powerful. Every time you heard them, it's like 5 or 6 times. But speaking of something else that was said during that presentation, a few verses here. Sean, any chance I could get you to read a couple?
Enoch 72:35, it says, the sun has completed its beginnings. The second time goes round from these beginnings. And then Ecclesiastes 1:5 says, also the sun rises and the sun sets, and hastening to its place, it rises there again.
Okay. Psalms 19:4-6 says he has placed a tent for the sun, which as a bridegroom is coming out of his chamber, it rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit is to the other end of them. Whereas 1 Ezra 4:34 says the earth is vast and heaven is high, and the sun is swift in its course, for it makes the circuit of the heavens and returns to its place in one day. So which of these models would you guys say probably best represents? Obviously the one on the left, at the bottom left there, right? And one thing that was brought up that really hit home with me earlier in Matthew's presentation, I don't remember if it was him that said it or a brother that was joining him on the screen, but they said when people, so often as they do, we've all heard it, they'll say this is either metaphor or this is poetry. And something that was said on that presentation earlier that really hit hard was they said when people say those things, that's them admitting that these verses say what they say. They just don't want to accept them as literal. They want to dismiss it with words like poetry and metaphor. But in the back of their mind, that's them saying, yeah, I agree. That's what it sounds like. It looks like, it's consistently describing a geocentric layout for the luminaries and whatnot, but they just can't admit that it does say that. Did anybody else get that? Yeah.
WesBlaze, that was Pastor Martin's commentary to Matthew Jansen. And this verse that you have on the screen here, Psalm 19:4-6, verse 6 there, the Hebrew word for the rising in that passage is this word motzah, which actually means in Hebrew going forth.
Right.
So it doesn't mean rising up and down. but it means going forth
Yep.
by its literal definition. So here's where you have a little bit of translator bias, from the English translations in the modern day. Whereas if you were to translate this before, the 1600s, before Galileo and all these new models came out, you may get a going forth from one end of the heaven to the other.
Absolutely. Yeah. And either way, it means that the sun is moving, right? And but we could all agree with that. Even the heliocentric, narrative displays a spiral solar system with the sun shooting millions of miles per hour as the, planets revolve around it. But we wouldn't hold to that as it shows here at the bottom. We got the model on the right and the model on the left. I think a circuit in the definition of that word is right in line with a geocentric setup.
And I think it's important to like, here's the thing. It would be different if people could own it, in my opinion, to say like, hey, I think it's poetry. It's, the perspective of men, right? It's just their perception. Like if Christians could own it, to me, I would feel so much better, like trying to have these conversations. But the issue is that they want to point it out as just the perspective of men, while somehow still trying to say that this is God's word in perspective, right? And so I think that they don't realize that by making it allegory or poetry, you are, in a sense, reducing it from the word of God to merely the perspective of men. And that's also why I respect softwares like Logos Bible software, right? Where they create that depiction based on what from the text you can see the writers believed, right? And so I think that's just important to point out.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, big shout out. Bill Shoot, $50 super chat, says you guys are the best. No, you are the best, bro. Well appreciated.
What's up, Bill?
As well as Miss Tammy, the king is coming. She said, we love you all, and she dropped a super chat as well. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Tammy. Appreciate that.
We're gonna split all that even, right? Everybody here. No.
Yeah. It's all going to the Antarctic. Go to the firmament fund.
Okay.
Rent the boat. Rent the stealth camouflage. All of it.
Got to get a puffy coat.
Coming 2057.
I'm probably the one to send, right, guys? Likely just being the northerner here. I've acclimatized to some cold enough weather. If you want to use me as a test dummy here,
bro, you're so close to that north. I think that might be what I'm more interested in.
Yeah.
So
But
I remember
then
back
again,
in
seeing the firmament. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. My bad.
I was just saying, then again, seeing the firmament at the ends of the earth would also probably be cooler. Who knows? What are you gonna say?
I know that that was a big deal back in 2015 to 2017. People were talking about, we got to get some sort of expedition going so we can get to Antarctica outside of the government regulation. Then they quickly realized that's not a reality, as the independent guy tried it and got turned away by the military. But I was always like, man, you'd need a series of drones that are powered by solar, but then there'd be no way to control them. They get outside of they would have to be pre-programmed flight path, because they would get outside of your actual, receiver range. So because you can't take fuel in a boat, you can't go there without being detected. So the only possible way is like a high altitude balloon that launched a drone off of it after it was shot down from the air. So long story short, before this turns into Tomb Raider, we would need a miracle of God to get around the powers that be that keep people from trying to actually go up to the firmament, wherever it is.
Yeah, just in the natural, you need like 3 different permits, special permission as a designated observer by your nation. There's a dozen. Then you need the equipment to actually can make it there, and that they're not going to let you travel freely. So just in the natural, there's so many hoops. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Really,
how many people could they stop? Like, think about like if everybody's trying, like what would they do? Would they just start like turning on us and like wiping us out? Like if like just people got fed up and like, all right,
boats at one time.
Yeah, like everyone.
I don't know,
like, all right,
Josh. How many people got the Fauci ouchie juice?
That's true.
Probably an indicator of what they would do.
Yeah.
I was reminded of the Area 51 facade charade that they played, where millions of people said they were going to go raid it, right? And then 60 people were there that day.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how it would be for us too.
all running like Naruto.
Yeah.
Forgot
about that.
Yep. Good
That's
stuff.
funny.
Well, Brother Ken Heidebrecht will not have long to hang out with us. So I'm really interested to hear, do you have any thoughts on any of these topics? Would you like to start a topic of discussion other than these? Go ahead.
You know, brother, honestly, I can't pick out an exact thing that you have said in one of these particular. I mean, I've seen them all, and they've all kind of blend in my mind. I want to give you guys, kudos for being so comprehensive with each episode that you do. There's a lot of good ministries out there and channels that put out really good content. But if someone's like really intrigued or wants to know more about this stuff, I do send them your way because I think it's super comprehensive. But I don't know. I'm just reflecting I'm just reflecting on my own moment where I started to consider this stuff, and it was back in 2015. Many people kind of started around that time, and I was off work because I had injured my back as a paramedic at the time, and I had some free time to just listen to whatever, right? And I was a big time Rob Skiba person, so I remember he had, I think it was Gon's Canary Cry Radio, if I recall correctly, on his channel, or he heard something on Gonz's channel, and it was about flat Earth. I think it was Mark Sargent's Flat Earth Clues or something like that. And it was weird. Like a lot of people kind of kick and scream when they hear it and mock it and make fun of it. For me, it was like, okay, yeah. I mean, this probably is correct. Like I really didn't have any like crazy scientific like argumentation to be like, no, but what about this and what about that? I've always been kind of like an open-minded person all my life. And so I had also years prior to this transitioned into like Torah observance. And so I was like really just allowing myself to be fed by, the Father, and just being willing to be open-minded. And so when I heard Rob having this interview with Gons, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to a lot of things in Scripture that I've read that in times past I've had to just kind of overlook or chalk it up as poetry, or we're told these were herdsmen, these goat herders who really had no knowledge of anything like that. Now we know everything is true based off our scientific method of today. And so I kind of I went with that, but I was like, that sucks that I have to believe that. So then when someone like Rob started peeling back the layers of this, I was like, oh, okay, like I've trusted him. He helped me big time in my walk. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna scoff at this. I'm gonna see if this is true. And so I was like a flat earth, or biblical cosmologist addict at the time. It was like, it consumed me. It annoyed my wife so much because I would just go outside at 3 in the morning and I just look up at the moon and be like, oh my gosh, like it's in the firmament, or it's like, it's so much closer, and it's not, the sun. Or I'd look at the sun randomly. We'd be walking down the road and, we're holding hands, and I just like stop, and I'm like, that sun is so much closer, sweetie. And she's like, oh gosh. She made that look. I'm like, it's not 93 million miles away. It's like, I think it's a lot closer. I think, so it definitely impacted my life significantly. It made me trust the Scriptures more. It made me understand that the Father has a structure that he has built, that he himself lives within, and he's got his giant family all situated in the different levels. And it just, it made more sense of eschatology for me.
Name a couple things real quick if you can. What specific parts of eschatology do you feel like it helped make more sense for you?
So 100% the Isaiah rolling back the heavens like a scroll to me. Never knew what to do with that. I would always read that or hear people talking about that, and then them talking about the giant rip of the universe, or like just different weird things like that. But I'm like, okay, if the firmament is a tangible structure, I could see that kind of like, Yahweh peeling it back and accommodating it in such a way that allows his house that he has up there literally come down. And so, just things like that. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And then when it lands on the earth, it's not landing on a globe and looking stupid and,
like a teeter-totter.
Yeah. So it just, it made eschatology that much more interesting to me. I could trust it more. And so it just gave me a generalized confidence in my walk and in my faith in the Father. So it's played a huge role in my faith for sure.
Same here, brother. You made a comment about that period of time where you felt like you were just utterly addicted to learning about it and just being immersed in the understanding and the brain explosions that were going on. Does anybody else here, quick raise a hand if you feel like there was a period of time where you could say, yeah, I was addicted to figuring this stuff out? Anybody? I know I did. I was.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I lost a job over it.
Did you? I think
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I lost relationships over it. I had one ex-girlfriend always saying, "Oh, you're flat earthing again." He's flat earthing.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a boss. I worked at this particular store. I had a boss who was very much against the idea, and there was like multiple stores where I worked at this time, and this was the owner of all those stores, and so I would go from one store to the next depending on where I was sent that week. And some of the other people I was working with, they would see what I was researching on the computer, which was FE stuff, and they would ask me about it, and I would try to talk about it. And I didn't know how to talk about it yet. I just was full of zeal and excitement because suddenly the scriptures made sense. And I'm sure they all thought I was just complete crazy as crazy can be.
Oh,
and so he made some snide comments to me one time because I had to go in a personal car ride with him. And he and I were in the truck driving across town. And he made some kind of snide comment, waiting, like as if he was goading me, so I would talk about it, right? And I said, well, it's an interesting thing because the Bible does claim that we live under a firmament. So if we believe the Bible, you as a Christian, you have a tough decision to make, I think. And he looked at me, and he wasn't a Christian, and I knew that. And he looked at me, and he's like, "Do you believe the Bible?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he just kind of like had this weird look on his face and just stopped the conversation. And so literally the next group employee meeting we had at 8 a.m. in the morning, he fired me in front of everybody without reason, without cause.
Whoa.
And everybody was like literally gasping, like, oh, what did he do? And everybody was like, because I was one of the better salesmen at the company. And so it was just, I'm pretty sure that was the conversation that sealed it, because he had a scowl on his face every time he saw me after that.
Yeah.
So
they love to almost dehumanize us when they find
Yeah.
that out, don't they? They want to act like you're scum of the earth. You are the most stupid person. And they'll say things like, go jump off the edge, go never have babies, don't reproduce.
Yeah.
We've heard it all. And it goes to the worst places of vitriol, doesn't it? What's up, Matthew?
I said flat tard is another one.
Yeah,
Flat tire, right?
And unfortunately, though, we see some of the same kind of gaslighting and name calling from not necessarily this community of brothers, but people who understand something like the biblical cosmological model. They'll have some of the same words like globe-tard and curvert, things like this.
I haven't heard that one.
Pervert, no. So things like that, just I want to encourage brothers and sisters to have some humility and grace. Remember those fruits of the Spirit, right? Love, patience, peace, kindness, joy, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, things like that. When you're talking to brothers, because all the questions we have are difficult when you first learn about this topic. But I think what's most difficult is then the interactions and your relationships with, like Sean said, people you work with, your family members, your friends, those kind of interactions, and how to manage and tackle and navigate all of that is probably one of the most difficult things. Wouldn't you guys say?
I think we also need to understand that those with uncontrolled zeal, and I think we've all been through that stage, and for some people it's a longer stage than others, but we have to remember that they just realize they've been lied to since children by adults that they trust, and they are really, really ticked off. Okay, and so we see that through the globe-tard phase, and so our job is to try and kind of help them through that. My wife helped me through that part of it, but we need to understand that they're going through a stage of grief. And I mean, I know when I first found out, I was physically sick for 3 days. Once I found out space didn't exist, I was physically sick for 3 days. I couldn't tell anyone. Because I didn't just believe in the heliocentric model. I was the original space cadet. I mean, being an illustrator from being a little guy every piece of art had something to do with space. Okay, even once I started drawing commercially, I tried to put space in clients' work. I mean, I was really into it, and then once I learned it didn't exist at all, I mean, I was pretty angry. So I understand where they're coming from.
Me too. Yep. And that's the kind of maturity you have to be able to develop to then be effective at ever talking about this in a productive way with anybody that's not on board. Yeah. Well said, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, people always ask me all the time in my comments on the videos when I do debates on whether it's the law being relevant for believers today, whether it's the Trinity, whether it's biblical cosmology, whatever the big contentious conversation is that people see on my channel. I often get comments that will say, "What has this gained you? Have you ever swayed anyone's opinion or thoughts on this?" And I'm just like, Matthew Jansen just gave a presentation. I've known him for 4 years, and it took him some time. You know what I mean? So, I'm not going to, he's one that's publicly come out about it, but I'm not going to talk about the letters I've gotten from other people I've had on my channel that have now changed their mind on some of the discussions we had.
Yep.
It just takes time, like it did with all of us. I didn't start my, Ken, I've known Ken the longest on here, and I didn't start my channel when I first met Ken. He and I were still just, we're still just in the trenches of Facebook groups trying to figure some of this stuff out, and getting called all kinds of crazy names. And that was like 4 years later, I started my YouTube channel, after I met Ken. So we put our time in trying to learn this stuff to be able to defend it. Well, first, to be able to know that we were confident what we were coming to the conclusion on. And then secondly, being able to defend it. Yeah. And man, I remember being in flat earth groups. Oh my goodness. The vitriol, the hatred, my standard responses just kept reverting to, "You're worth more. You don't have to act like that." Instead of, because I knew they were just goading me in a troll manner. They weren't trying to have a real conversation. It was just all mockery, because there's not a lot of ways to prove you live on a ball in space. You have to believe it. It's a religious belief put forward, and they're told to them that you're smart, you're intelligent, you're wise, you're, all the world believes it. It's the mass appeal to consensus. And so when you start to go against that grain, if you can't defend it yet, but yet you want to talk about it, you got to be prepared for that backlash, because people will rip you apart.
Yeah, that's tough, because as soon as you come to understand it, you have all that zeal, like you said, you want to tell people about it. It's bursting at the seams within you, but it's difficult, because you really should spend some time and do your due diligence to be able to answer some of the basic questions, at least when you want to go to try to talk to people about it, because otherwise it feels like it discredits you when people try to ask you some of the basic questions that you would think we should have an answer for. And if you can't, they're immediately going to dismiss it. They might anyways, but if you could have some answers. I heard one person recently, it was Miss Morgan, wildly unpopular, actually said she was talking to somebody that would come around and ask her some questions, and because she had an answer for every one of those questions, he considered it enough to actually keep looking into it, and now is on board. So
speaking of Ken, you remember when we first met, right? We're speaking of one of these.
It was at a park, buddy. Yeah, we were eyes locked.
Yeah, it was in some kind of private Rob Skiba group, and basically I was the crazy guy that brought up the last topic on this list. Do you remember that, Ken?
I remember you bringing it up, and I remember you provided me with just like a synopsis on what that was and the research that you were doing at the time. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this is possibly going to be more controversial than flat Earth if this gets out, Sean. I didn't know what to think about it at the time. I was like, okay, because I know a piece of it, from what I recollect, was based off of something in Jasher, which we're going to be covering Sunday. But I know you don't use that mainly in your presentation. But I was like, there's no way that this can be really true, could it? But since watching your Investigating Babylon series, there's a lot of validity to it for sure.
So when I first introduced this idea to you, like I didn't have all the details that I put into my Investigating Babylon series at that time, because that was like 2015, early 2015, I think. But coming to biblical cosmology helped me understand that theory much to how to investigate that theory much, much better. And so that's where, because I was like, well, what does make eclipses? What's going on with the eclipses? That was the big thing in all the FE communities that nobody could figure out. And there's all this conjecture. And I was like, well, what if there's an indication in the Bible? What if the Bible tells us, right? And so this is where if I had not had biblical cosmology, I would have never come to this full conclusion with 21 parts full of evidences and scriptural correlations. I would have never had that investigative pathway to develop, because I would not have had the right mindset, the right, outlook, if you will. It's kind of like, I've said this a few times in my own videos, just the idea that great detectives, they will never, they don't care about the suspects. They basically say it's easier to solve the problem if you're a detective if you ask the right questions. So for them, it's like really whittling down, how do I find out what to ask? Not just that I go and explore all these paths, because so many of them can be just a rabbit trail or a lost cause, and you don't find anything. But if you ask the right questions, it reveals the path much easier. And so without biblical cosmology, I would have never been able to ask the right questions that leads me to the conclusion of, all right, what is Mother Babylon? Why is the scripture mentioning a mother and a daughter Babylon, a mother and a daughter Jerusalem? What is this dichotomy and this comparison they're bringing up? And so that's where, all of you guys have known in the past couple of years, I've put forward my research and my investigation. And I'm really surprised that nobody is making mockery videos about it. Like they make mockery videos, they make hit piece videos about it, about the Trinity. But because I'm not a Trinitarian, but this one hasn't really caught on yet. And I'm surprised. What do you guys think about it?
I've likewise been surprised too. The worst I've seen from it is like, somebody just saying, I don't know what to think about that, because you could tell it gets them thinking. And then I guess the other worst thing was somebody said, oh, you're fear mongering. This is fear porn, like the, October 4th stuff and all that. And I was like, but look, again, I'm not saying anything terrible is going to happen the day of the solar eclipse necessarily. I'm saying this is just what it's always been. So for anybody unfamiliar, Sean is talking about Mother Babylon, Satan's home, the 7th and final topic on this list. And there may be a few guys on our panel here that hasn't seen our material on it, and that's okay. But Sean, could you put up what I've got presented? This is intimately, as you've heard, tied to the solar eclipse, which we just had one the other day. And so we are told by mainstream science, so-called scientism, that the sun's rays reach Earth parallel, right? Eratosthenes had that assumption going into his experiment with the sticks and shadows, and that's just what they say, except when you have a solar eclipse. And then all of a sudden, the sun's rays reach Earth in the shape of the sigil of Satan. And so what does that have to do? What does Satan have to do with the solar eclipse? We're here to tell you it's everything to do with the solar eclipse. And maybe even that's why we get some images like we see here. So I'm really curious to talk. There was a lot of photographs, people, with technology more affordable and so easy to get, and so many people interested in these things. In this day and time, you had a lot of people taking photos of this most recent solar eclipse, and this is one of them. I believe this was a unedited photo, and it's for the most part that it's just, if there's anything done to it, it was just to enhance what's already there for you to see it.
Sure.
And then so we had some like this. There were some other ones with more pointed, points on the stars, but I think this was interesting, especially because I've never seen a rock do this, like a dusty rock ball. make sunlight go into these crazy designs of light.
And
like this.
The double Trinity reflection, cross reflection that it's producing is the symbol for the Star of Remphan, which I covered on one of my 42 series videos, which is the Kiwan, with some biblical translations from Amos call it Kiwan, but it is basically the same thing. It is the Om from ancient India, which was the supposed essence, vibrational power from which Brahma created all things.
Brahma being Satan.
Yeah, Brahma being the Indian version of Satan. And so this is why this double Trinity, they call it a double Trinity. It's called a Trimurti symbol in India, but it's basically the Star of David is what we know it as in the West. And it's Yeah, it's a 6-pointed star that is a symbol for Kiwan or Rimfam, and it's for Satan. Basically, it's a symbol for Satan.
How about that?
I was really glad to see you pull this up, because this was one of the things that I was going to bring up and see what you guys' thoughts were on this. I mean, there's so much symbology in every culture that you can see in this one image here. It's astonishing.
Yeah. The crescent moon is used by Islam a lot, right? And the Masons, the Shriners, they use it. A lot of so-called pagan cultures and whatnot do.
Got a question. What do y'all think about the right up there at the top of the disc? There's kind of a separation at where the crescent is, and then there's a little light that goes in between. Any thoughts on what that is?
Makes you wonder. What do you think, Sean?
I think it's the double-gated dome effect.
I was just about to say
that. I think it was Plubius that talked about the description of Zeus's home. So, guys, Zeus would have been the Greek version of Ra to the Egyptians, who would have been Brahma to the Indians, who would have been Kiwan or Rimfam. And so the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, 6th century BC, they talked about how his home was Mount Olympus, and it was in the sky, and it had a double-gated dome over the top. So that, to me, would make perfect sense. If you're enclosing some sort of atmosphere, you need a double-gated dome, just like you see in science fiction movies. You have a decompression zone for the outer layer to be protected from the inner layer. And as a result of that, that means you have 2 glass enclosures or crystalline, who knows what it's made of, but you have 2 transparent enclosures on the exterior of it that would cause weird light effects if there was massive light passing through it.
It looks like the all-seeing eye pyramid too on the top. There's a little thing there. Like,
isn't it though? Yeah. Lots of different symbology all wrapped up in one, right? Let me pull up one other image here, because like you said, Sean, that double-gated dome that it's. Sorry, go ahead.
Was somebody saying something?
I think Matthew Beaver.
Yeah, I was wanting to bring something up about. I was wanting to bring something up that relates to the solar eclipse. But if y'all want to keep talking about this for a few minutes, I would like to bring it up. That I think it'll bring some good discussion, especially for the audience.
That's cool, bro. Yeah, this is we're looking at the solar eclipse, and so for anybody that doesn't know, we have put forward that it is not the moon, that the lesser light that God created that is eclipsing the sun. And so a lot of people say Rahu, this Rahu and Ketu or Kehu, whatever, that they think that has to do with this. And so it's part of it, but there's more to it. And so we're saying that Satan is real. He's an actual rebellious angel who's not up hanging out with God above the firmaments of heaven, but he's the God of this world, and that he actually has a home where he's not right down here in the midst of us to where people can attack him or anything, but he's in his own little safety in his lair, the dragon's lair, that is it's known as the Eye of Ra, the Mount Meru to the Indians, where Brahma lived, the Mount Olympus, as Sean said, where Zeus lived. And for anybody that's not familiar, let me pull this up right quick. I got a couple more images here. Anybody that's not familiar, Revelation 2 actually tells us that Satan's throne was in Pergamum. And if you look in through history, it was known for the throne in Pergamum being the altar of Zeus, right? And so if you look at the just lots of connections, we went over a lot of them in our episode, the serpent of old, that connected a lot of these, the head of the pantheon, the king of the pantheon of gods for these pagan cultures was just Satan reinventing himself. The culture themselves might not have thought of him as the Satan evil character bad guy. They might have thought of him as their god, but it was Satan disguised. And so we talked about that. And then we also talked about this. And this is what I wanted to get to, that would possibly describe, like you said, Sean, what makes sense of that refraction, the reflections of the light patterns that you see coming off of the solar eclipse, which would to me only make sense with some sort of crystalline structure, like a prism, like a glass of some kind. So right here, like you said,
that's why they call it that diamond ring effect.
Yeah, Ring of Fire. That too.
You have people crying on ABC. It's the diamond ring.
Right.
They get all emotional and weird.
What did the Beatles? The Beatles had a song called "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," something like that. Lucifer.
Wes, do you have anything about solar bands in your slides?
Oh, I'm just pulling these out of my memes. I didn't have slides prepared. I was just going to see where we were going with it.
Oh yeah, I was wanting to bring shadow bands up if we could, because a lot of people that research scriptural cosmology, I've talked to quite a few people about solar bands or shadow bands, which, from my research, somebody correct me if I'm wrong on the panel, that this phenomenon only occurs during a solar eclipse. And there's only a few videos on YouTube about it, which is very interesting. So I was blessed with the opportunity to watch the solar eclipse like in a direct path. I was in Farmington, New Mexico. I was going to watch it in the Four Corners area, but I was about 2 hours from it. So I recorded it. So I might have a video coming out soon about that, possibly, but I don't know if the footage is good. So what it is you can put like a sheet, like a white sheet or a white poster board. So it's like cheap redneck sciencing. Because I spent like $1 on a poster board that's white, and I set my phone up with my little tripod that doubles as a selfie stick, and I just hit play, and I think it happens like 5 to 7 minutes before and after totality. So, and it's like little waves of it looks really cool, little waves of energy that occur during this time. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's a really cool phenomenon.
Okay,
sorry,
no worries. Were you talking about the crescents that show up in like the shadows that get casted on the ground?
No, this is different.
No.
Okay.
Hey, real quick, guys. Ken's about to leave. Ken, we just want to say big shout out. Thank you for joining us on the panel tonight. We look forward to your presentation on Sunday. And of course, if you have the opportunity and the time, Ken, you're welcome to join us for the speakers panel on Saturday night as well. So you don't have to be there the whole time, but if you want to make a cameo, that's cool. And then I look forward to seeing you also Sunday afternoon for Honor of Kings.
Yes, absolutely. It's been awesome. You guys are great. Thank you so much for having me on, you guys. And on Common Ground, Season 2, Episode 50. I'm so happy to have been a part of it. It's a monumental, epic, historical thing, guys. Thank you.
Well appreciated.
Good job, brother.
You are loved,
Yes.
bro.
Take care.
Coming through.
Later, brother.
We were talking about the shadow bands and the different phenomena associated. Who was talking last?
And Matt, when you say shadow bands, you talking about the like crescent shape on the ground?
No, that's something different.
It's different.
That's something different.
Can you define it for the audience real quick?
Do what now?
Can you define what that term you're using for the audience real quick?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. It's called shadow bands. We just did a video on it. Go to our YouTube channel, Founded Earth Brothers, our last video we did about it, so that people will be looking for it. Because when I was researching the properties of the firmament, this was one of them, and they were described as jail bars moving across. If there was like snow on the ground, they said it looked like jail bars are moving across the surface of the snow. And so some people noticed it on their houses. They're looking at their houses because everybody is, of course, looking up, right? And so people that were looking around are like, what are these bars moving across the surfaces of these white surfaces? And so now there's videos on YouTube. If you look up solar eclipse shadow bands, then you'll find it.
It's really cool. It's like little waves of light. It's very faint. You have to have really good skills with photography and videography to actually capture it. So I'm not sure if I was successful because I haven't looked at my footage yet, which I plan on doing that probably Friday or Sabbath. So, but it's a really cool phenomenon, and I believe it only happens during a solar eclipse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can replicate it. What I find is cool. When I was a young teenager, I had one of those laser pointers, and I would shine it through glass and let it hit the walls and just make these cool patterns. And when I saw the first time I ever saw footage of shadow bands, it looked just like that. I mean, it was like this wavy, kind of like hypnotic thing just moving across the surface. And I thought, like you said earlier, Wes, like this is not just a dust rock, with light shining around it. Like there's light shining through a layer of the firmament, and it is really, really cool. There it is right there. Somebody has a poster board like Matt was talking about, and you can see the waves moving across this thing. Like it is really, really cool. There it is.
Yep. There it is.
So yeah, I was going to ask you, Matt, if you had footage of that, because that was something you were going to film.
Josh, you're saying, all right, that looks like Mystery Science Theater. Is that a shadow band or is that?
Yeah, that's a shadow band
on the screen. Okay.
So that stick moving across is I don't know what that is. Somebody must have walked in front of the poster board, but it looks like almost like the surface of water. Yeah.
Okay.
I hear you. It reminds me of the way like certain stained glass and
Right.
things will have light pass through it and put
Yep.
reflections on the wall and stuff.
So you're saying that what we're looking at is not the topographical undulation of a snowy field, but is instead all those different shades of shadows are moving laterally across a pure white snow field. Because I'll be honest with you, what
As
that
opposed
looks
to-
like, it looks like a. I mean, I just have to take, whoever filmed this, their word for it, but it looks like a camera moving really fast while
Yeah.
filming the ground, like
Mhm.
on a bottom of a helicopter flying.
Yeah,
over.
they're filming a poster boards, and these aren't flat earthers. These like hardly any flat earthers know about this. These are people that just somehow, I don't know how they found out about it, because it took me. I just found it almost by chance, even though I don't think it was by chance. But there's several videos. There it is. The brightness is better when it's not in complete totality, but there's some laser. I was doing some laser things, but yeah, this is somebody filming poster boards. I think they just taped some poster boards up and pointed a camera at it. And it's hard to film when it's not totality because it's so bright. I guess the light coming back, it kind of bleaches it out. But yeah, that's
So what are
wild.
they filming? The underside or the top of the poster board? What are you talking about? Poster boards? They hold them above their head.
Yeah,
They put
when
them,
you let it play for a second and get to the clip where it's in the light, it's I think right now it's, I don't know for sure, but go forward.
Go forward. Go right. Yeah, right in there. Right.
Well, we
there.
just watched
There you
that
go.
though, and it didn't really.
Yeah, see, there's a poster
You can
board
see
kind
at
of. It looks
least.
like they got it balanced up, almost like a movie screen outside.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, I thought this was being filmed. I thought the rectangle was the video screen,
No, here
but
it is.
this is an actual billboard type thing.
Yeah.
There's
And
another one. There's another one, Sean. If you type in Shadow Bands 2017, there's a person that put a sheet on they might have been in like a cul-de-sac or something, and this is on the ground. So
Okay.
and it's
So-
pretty easy to see.
And what do they have a theory on what they think is being what the shadows are, or what the?
No, from the globe perspective, there's nothing that can make that. So they're like, we're at a loss. We don't know. It's just a mysterious phenomenon because they don't know about the firmament. To them, it's just like that light shining around a rock. They have no clue.
A skeptic could say it's just light through the clouds passing over, but even from this footage here, it doesn't look like there's many clouds in the sky.
Yeah, good point.
But even light shining through clouds would not cause such a defined manifestation of shadow. It's
There's
far
some
too
contrast
defined.
there.
Yeah, it clearly looks like it's being shot through some type of transparent substrate. And to actually record it even better, you would have to use a camera. But one of the best, since it was so bright, I would have set my ISO really, really low. And that would have increased the contrast and been able. Now you would lose everything else around it, but who cares? You're trying to get that phenomenon.
Yeah,
But
that's why we need camera experts out there filming these things. People that know what ISO is.
Josh, you say the firmament.
That's the sensitivity of the camera. So any camera is going to have an ISO setting. And don't put it on auto ISO because that won't work. You would have to put it low. Like I have a camera that will go as low as 64. But most cameras will go to 100, and that's good.
Maybe that was just the solar light just is just creating shadows of all the angels running to and fro in the earth.
I do want to pull up the quote if we can to show where we get this idea, or to supplement the idea that there may be some sort of glass involved with this object that's now causing these phenomena that we see during a solar eclipse. And it's from, like you said, I believe, I can't get that part to go away on the bottom, Publius, I think he said. But he says, meanwhile, Olympus, seat of sovereign sway, Olympus being Mount Olympus, the home of Zeus that they consider to be up in the sky. It says it threw wide its portals, and in conclave fair the sire, the authority of the gods and king of all mankind, who they call Zeus, summoned the immortals to his starry court, whence high enthroned the spreading earth he views, and to Crea's camp and Latium's fierce array beneath the double-gated dome, the gods were sitting above. Jove, Zeus is another, like Jupiter, it's another name for him. It's where Zeus was sitting himself, and the silence broke, it says. But Yeah, it calls it a double-gated dome, but we don't get any description of the firmament of heaven that describes it like that. And if anything, it's got multiple gates, more than two, so it wouldn't be called a double gate on the firmament of that dome. But
Wait a
if
minute.
this,
Doesn't Jay-Z call himself Hova?
yeah, right. But we got here Olympus being described by historians who believed in its existence, and they believed in Zeus as a real being that actually came down and interacted with people. They believed he lived up here with a double-gated dome. So what's up?
Yeah, in the same regard that ancient historians, or excuse me, modern historians will claim that ancient testimony from different nations described a firmament. All of them described a firmament enclosed reality. And they just, some of them, they personified the firmament, like the Egyptians called it Nut, a female for personification of the firmament. Others, like the Babylonians, they considered it made of bricks. And so they had different descriptions and different personifications of an actual enclosed heaven over the earth. None of them, believed in undefined vastness of space outside of that firmament. And they all believed that the gods they served lived in the sky between the clouds and the firmament. They all had the same story. So they just, spoke different languages, therefore they called them by different names, but it was all the same thing, and that's I think that's really important to understand. Just like if we're talking about, Dr. Michael Heiser, like Matthew Jansen showcased in his documentary today, they all describe the ancient world, the people of the ancient world all describe the creation the same way. And it's only until modern times do all the reinterpretations, the new definitions come up where they say, oh, no, the firmament doesn't mean a hard substance that's beat out like metal, or that is an expanse that's spread out over like a tent. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means the atmosphere. It just means, it just means like layers of atmosphere that can become hard from density. Or it just means, that was just their accommodating speech back then because they didn't really know how to explain stuff. They do that same trick when it comes to this concept here of where did these ancient gods actually exist that these people believed in and sacrificed humans to. Like that's how much they believed in these things, is they destroyed nations and sacrificed innocent people to these gods. But it literally, all of them had a pantheon with a lead person at the top of it. And that's what WesBlaze has on screen here.
Yep. We got Ra to the Egyptians, Ra being a Hebrew word that means evil. Brahma contains the word Ra, but what the Hindus would have known him as Zeus, as we already covered. And then to the Norse, he was called Odin, right? Odin and Thor and Loki. Those guys lived on a place in the sky called Asgard. And every culture believed this in some regard, maybe called it a different thing, but had the same view.
So I was going to ask, so how do you think that this came to be? Do you think that it was, the actual influence of like fallen angels in every single one of the cultures, or maybe they were borrowing from an older story before them? How?
When you say this, what's that a pronoun for?
So the fact that they all believed in deities that lived in the sky.
How do you think that came to be?
Yeah, like all of them,
Well, that's I think it was actually in episode 8 that we highlighted as one of the top episodes in season 1. I had some of those quotes that talked about, it was a quote from an Indian merchant who was during the days of the Roman Empire. And he talked about how the gods were given them these crafts for the means of saving lives, but it was the same crafts that the gods would traverse from heaven down to earth. And so they've all, as far as the different nations, all knowing that, all collectively agreeing that the gods lived in the sky. Are you asking how it came to be as far as like through mechanics and science? How did they put a domicide up in the sky?
No, so I'm just thinking the fact that all these different nations are so similar, right? And how they describe their deities, how they relate to each other, where they live, them all being similar,
I think it'd be interesting also to point out that all of the constellations across every culture, across every language, is named the exact same thing. What's the statistical probability of that happening?
I was going to answer your question, Michael, by saying that if the if every culture is believing this in some capacity, I would suggest that that's evidence that they observed it, that they knew about it in existence, visible reality.
Yep.
And especially if back then Satan was a little more involved, he maybe have been a little more less secretive and wanting people to know about his power and authority. And I think that's a little bit of what he does every time he wants to block out the sun, is showing his authority he thinks he has.
Yeah, and Michael, that's actually what I tried to cover. Hang on, I'm trying to put a little bit more light on myself, but it's not really working. That's what I tried to cover in my in episode 1 of my Investigating Babylon series, where I talk about some of the quotes from Josephus and how he talked about the Tower of Babel. At the Tower of Babel, once it was destroyed and the people with them were dispersed, they took both the priests that showed up to the Tower of Babel were already worshiping Jupiter.
I remember this episode. Yeah.
Yeah. So like they already were worshiping Satan. This is how they become deceived to even start this grand rebellion against Yahweh's instruction, which was to go out and multiply on the earth. And they said, no, we're going to collectively get together in this big city and try to ascend to heaven. So like they were already tricked by a grand deceiver into that all anyway. And Nimrod was the human king. I would say he was a Gibborim. He was a part human, part Nephilim, but he was the human representation, if you will, of that directed worship to Jupiter. And so this is where they already had priests. That means they already had, rites and rituals and process dedicated to worshiping a false god, which would have been Satan. And so once they scattered from the Tower of Babel, they're all still worshiping that same god. They just speak a different language now.
Yep.
So it's all the same story, just spread around the earth.
Yeah.
And the father was like, oh, I'm going to give my dedicated children a wonderful mission field and to go out in all these different countries and spread my truth.
It's really interesting how that I think has also taken place in many other topics of the word of the scriptures. Like, for example, the Trinity, where, where did they start pulling a lot of the ways they were thinking about these things, trying to, conceptualize what the scripture was saying. I think it's interesting how all that's related as well. With
Yeah, sneak peek, everyone. Don't miss Michael's presentation tomorrow on Trinity on Trial. I'm sure it's going to be a banger, so don't miss that tomorrow. Same thing for our brothers Flat Out Insights. They're presenting tomorrow as well, so don't miss them either.
It's going to be a good time. Yeah, so when we come to passages like this, if you could pull it back up, Sean, just in the same vein, while we're still on the topic, before we move from it, when we come to passages that say, like Matthew 4:8, and we see it again in Luke, that again the devil took him, Yeshua, Jesus Christ, to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And if we consider the context of the 1st century AD, all the kingdoms of the world that were populated, there is not a mountain that we think of connected to the earth that's tall enough to see all the world's kingdoms that were populated back then. The only way this is possible is if the mountain was high above the earth in the sky, like the palace of Zeus, which is called a mountain, Mount Olympus, was believed to be. They call it Mount Meru to the Indians, right? So we would propose that this is one example in scripture where we see it pop up, as well as we got Jeremiah, though Babylon should ascend to the heavens, and though she should fortify her lofty stronghold, lofty being a word that means up in the air, from me, destroyers will come to her. And so we have passages like that. And then one other set here, just a couple we see like in Revelation, we got Satan being thrown down and come down, thrown down over again, over and over. It says that Satan is thrown down. The dragon had no more place found in the heaven. And so keep in mind, sometimes that word heaven doesn't necessitate that it means the firmament of heaven, the structure of it. Sometimes it's the space between the ground and the firmament, just the sky. And so then we see other things like he's been thrown down, the devil has come down to you, all these consistent narrative, just like we see in Acts when they thought that Paul and Barnabas were Zeus and I believe Hermes, they said. And they said that the gods had come down to them because they believed that they lived up in the sky. And so I think it's over and over again referenced in scripture. We just didn't necessarily realize because it's been hidden so well, even though it's up in plain sight.
Yeah, and that's what I also talked about, the the Paradise Stone, which is in the corner of the Macabre in Mecca, that Islam walks in circles around. That cornerstone, according to legend, from the cornerstone, it came from the same people in Acts that they believed a piece of heaven had fallen down to them, and they started to reverence it. And so it was transferred to Palestine over time, and then down to Saudi Arabia. But that was supposedly what we see them freaking about in the book of Acts, in one of Paul's missionary journeys. So long story short, a piece of Mother Babylon had fallen to the earth, and they started worshiping it.
Yeah. As they had already done with the entire, Eye of Ra was then personified as Inanna, Isis, Ishtar, that same goddess that was repeated and named different names throughout the different cultures, is a personification, anthropomorphized of the Mother Babylon, Eye of Ra, as they state in
a whole bunch of
historians. Hathor,
the queen of heaven, literally. That's why
Diana.
they would worship the queen of heaven. It became an object of worship as well, just like we see people worship the globe. I put forward the theory they literally patterned the globe after this thing.
How about that? After Satan's home, huh?
Yeah. That's why when you start to look at the globe, it quickly falls apart mathematically, geometrically, according to vision and distance and measurement. Like it quickly falls apart because it was never the model wasn't built upon math or observation. It was retrofitted to an already idolatrous worship.
Right.
Now, if that was the case, it would have some sort of sun god worshiping name like Helios, and that it was centered around that.
Right.
You don't say.
No way.
Yeah, and even think about the paradise. Like I said, that the corner. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but the corner of that big black box in Mecca that a lot of the people they journey to it once a year to walk around it and pray, and they go up to it and they touch it and make their prayers. That little piece of black obsidian they think came down from paradise in heaven. And so the Greeks, they called the paradise Elysium, which was in the sky, not above the firmaments, but in the sky above the clouds. And so this is where it's so funny because the Father's paradise is actually above the firmament, but the enemy's paradise, according to the ancients, was always in the sky above.
Yeah, and speaking of the paradise, when we look in 2 Corinthians 12, it actually talks about Paul saying that he knew a guy. He went up to the third heaven, and he said it was taken up to a place called paradise. So we're getting a lot of that language that we've kind of been forced to just breeze over because it meant nothing before. Well, on a globe model, none of that makes sense. So just read the next verse. Or now, when you can read it and actually dig into it and see, hey, there's different levels being spoken of. There's a paradise that we may or may not have missed throughout reading it. So, and this is from Paul. This is post Yeshua. This is in an environment where you would say this doesn't seem like it fits, but yet it lines up so well when you actually start to apply it to a biblical cosmology. You want to try to understand the things that you guys are talking about right now.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize the history of the ancient world 2,000 years ago when Christ came on the scene. The Christians that started popping up all over, the known world. I shouldn't say it like that. The Christians that started growing through persecution over the next 200 years, all throughout the Roman Empire, brought a serious threat to Zeus worship. Zeus had been the main patron god of worship for over 2,000 years. He was Baal. He was, I would personally, long story short, he was that whole pantheon had a patron god within that governed over that pantheon. So within that family of gods that they attributed false worship to, different languages called them different things depending on which region you're in. But the Romans came in, assumed the Greek gods, renamed them after Roman names, came into Palestine and that whole region of Samaria and Jerusalem and Judea, and they, took all the false idol gods, renamed them into Roman concepts. And so they did that wherever they went. But it was the same type of worship. It wasn't worship of Yahweh. It was worship in a false way through horrific things, that we've all read from the scriptures. So a lot of people don't realize that when Christians started growing in 1st, 2nd century AD, it was a serious threat to Zeus worship, like serious. It was because remember, guys, the temples to Baal, they were not just like like I tried to show in my Investigating Babylon series. I tried to show the documented historical receipts for historians claiming that the temples in Acadia, Sumeria, and Babylon to Nergal, those were like Amazon warehouses. This wasn't just a sterile building where you went in and there was some prostitutes hanging out that you could interact with, and then you offered your animal for sacrifice. It wasn't that simple. These were massive places where exchange was taking place. It was the Walmart of their days. And these were temples to their gods that had mass resources that then they, this is why the Father is always talking about unjust weights and balances, like, because they would scam and rob people for sometimes false hope, false fate, false prophecy, and then pleasure that was sinful and destructive to your family and your community, and then do it at a false price to then turn around and have goods now that they could sell out to the people. This is why in the region, Tyre was the largest export that Ezekiel mentions Tyre in chapters 25 to 28. So the point is, this was not just about the idea of a false religion. It had everything to do with money, corruption of money, swindling the people out of their money, and then using that for their war machine, and then using that for commerce, because trade was, an essential backbone of any economy in any nation. So these temples were not just, there for show. They were practical uses. And so as a result of that, when suddenly no one's worshiping at that temple anymore because they're a Christian, you're hurting their economy.
Right.
So I don't think it's any, it should not be a surprise to us when we get to Revelation 13 later, and suddenly you can't buy, sell, and trade unless you're worshiping the beast, because it's always been intricately tied. Just like the Father's temple, Leviticus 27, is its own version of an economy that was designed to take care of the widows, the orphans, and the poor. And so I'll stop ranting, but I just want to let people know a broader scope for anyone that may never heard this. It wasn't simply just, we want to go worship this other god because we like worshiping a stone idol that doesn't talk back to us. No, they got enticed with creature comforts, and then it was encouraged by the powers that be so that it funded their nation. So it was all intricately tied to their economy, way more than just being deceived by unclean spirits into worshiping something that can't speak to you. Does that make any sense?
It does.
And the Father calls the uneven scales an abomination too. So yep.
Yeah,
sure does. So I'm really stoked that we got to talk about this topic because we didn't get to really cover some of the luminous phenomenon like we just saw with the Star of David in our episode of Uncommon Ground that we did on this topic, and it'd be because all that solar eclipse stuff just happened, and I figured there might be some brothers that could be even skeptical about what we're talking about. And I invite you guys to voice your opinions. If you're here with us and you're not sure if you 100% would agree with what we're talking about, that Satan has a literal home in the sky, you're invited to, I give you a warm welcome to speak about it.
It makes sense to me. Sorry, it just makes a lot of sense to me. That he would have a home, because Scripture talks about it in so many places, and many of the brothers are right that we read it and just overlook it. I've done that in the past. I was brought up to read the Bible literally. Clearly, I didn't do a very good job of it, but I was, my mom tried to teach me how to read the Bible literally, and so I remember reading Scripture like that and just glossing over it because, hey, we live on a globe. But that makes a lot of sense to me that he would have a domain in between the earth and the dome.
Good. Yeah, you made a comment earlier that suggested, based on your understanding of the visuals that we get and your professional, knowledge about cameras and all those things, that there had to be some glass involved that caused those effects. And so that tells me that you're open to the idea that it's not the moon and that it's something different. So.
Oh no, no, it's definitely not the moon.
Yeah.
No, Helios. The beautiful thing about enclosed cosmology is all the evidence is on our side, and I mean literally all of it. Heliocentrism has no evidence to support it at all. It's all belief, and so when you truly tear it apart, it's one false belief on top of another, and it has no empirical evidence to back it up. When people say, well, what about the photographs in the video? Oh, you can tear those apart. That's not hard, especially when you have the foundation of the truth. And the beautiful thing about heliocentrism is empirical evidence. So you can tear apart heliocentrism easily. So, yeah.
You sure can.
I think one of the things, Wes, when it comes to how the church is typically thought of, or even just this, what is all proposed through the Babylon series of that Death Star, right? We sort of think of it as how Yahweh is a spirit who lives in this other realm, and we almost view Satan in the same way. Now, if you're involved with like spiritual warfare ministry, right? Not only do we see demons, there are instances of incubus and succubus and manifestations, and we see all these things physically, right? And they manifest in this physical form. My neighbor is a ghost hunter, and he goes out and does these things and gets scratched physically by them.
Right.
And so now we go and make this next step where it says where Satan presides in Scripture, we see he presides in the sky. Yet we, as the church, we almost lump him in as, not that he has fallen, that he's still in this spiritual realm of a place where Yahweh is, and we actually don't even believe the things that we actually say we believe. And so to propose those things, it makes a whole lot of sense. And we've seen it time in and time out in this physical manifestation. So to say where he presides and where he lives, I don't believe it's such a far stretch in any manner.
It's good to hear you say that. Yeah, absolutely, brother. Yeah, it's been it was a little jarring for me to realize, oh wow, this stuff is actually real, because that's the basis of it. That's what it really breaks down to at its pure, uncut state, is that when we try to imagine angels or the Father himself as these wispy, intangible, non-physical beings that have no basis in reality that we understand, we dismiss the reality of them. And I feel like when you realize things like you just said, that's something I wish that we had talked more about when Sean, Ken, and I did our episode on unclean spirits. We even mentioned being a little confused and wishing to understand more about how they can physically interact or hurt people. How is it that the book of Tobit says Asmodeus killed how many, 7 of that woman's lovers? And so these things are evidence that the spirit world absolutely has some tangibility to it in some capacity, that it can either affect what's tangible, or it itself is a tangible object or being, just maybe in a way we don't understand. But yeah, we see the scriptures talk about the Father has a body, the angels have body, the angels come down and eat multiple times in Scripture. Genesis 18 with Abraham, Genesis 19 with Lot. And so it's to me, it's evident that we don't fully grasp the reality of these things, even after becoming believers and after recognizing a lot of truths, until things like this make you think. So I'm excited to see you guys thinking about these things.
Yeah, Wes, I think that at the underpinning, like the undercurrent of our psychology is the questioning of the reality. Like when this biblical cosmology topic comes up, it forces people to say, but wait, if this place is not a rock in space, and if it's just as simple as a massive house with 7 stories and we're on the bottom floor, then that means the angels and the Creator live above us, as the Bible says. Then that brings this tangible reality to their minds that they've never had since birth, because everything in our culture since birth has always made God mystical and unknowable. Which, by the way, is a form of Gnosticism from ancient Egyptian and Greek philosophy, is this idea that you cannot understand God or actually know him, but you must venerate him. So, it's the perfect cop-out for Satan, right? But not for Yahweh the Almighty, whom is transparent and wants us to know him, right? And tells us like it is. So when he tells us he lives on the top firmament, the firmament of firmaments, the heaven of the heavens, he tells us that he is literally looking down on us. Like I think it's Psalm 33. He's looking down on the earth, on the affairs of men. Like he's not just speaking this concrete language, assuming that we're going to take it as ethereal. Like he's speaking it intentionally. So he wants us to know he made us just as real as we touch and interact with things on this level of creation. So also there's levels of creation above us that are real, and his home itself is a place where there's going to be an abundance of crops that are watered from the river of life. There's, you know what I'm saying? There's animals up there. Like it's going to be a place. There's homes that Yeshua is literally preparing for us right now. These are why would Christ even mention that if that's not a reality? He's not fashioning a home out of a cloud. That's not a home. That would make no sense to the listener as far as like, oh, you should have understood him to be, he's just fashioning air wisps to make you a home out of cloud. Like, no, that's not the way. No, it's tangible stuff. And I think that biblical cosmology in its entirety assaults the cogdis within all of us, that we've all been trained to believe that heaven's not an actual real tangible place.
Right.
Well, I just listened to a pastor who took that ethereal theology to the outer limit, literally. This guy was actually preaching that hyperspace is biblical, that it actually exists. I had to stop laughing so that I could actually hear what he was trying to say. And
he's talking about Star Trek, where the stars start like streaming by you, and that's how that kind of hyperspace.
Yep, literally. Okay, nice. This guy saying hyperspace is an actual other dimension, and that's where demons live and stuff like that. But of course, I mean, he's a full believer in heliocentrism, and he was trying to prove this in Scripture, and of course he didn't. It was a hoot to listen to, but he actually believed it. And aside from the hilarity of it, he was hurting his congregation because he's a very popular pastor, and he was hurting his congregation by not forcing them, but convincing them to believe that an aspect of Star Trek is actually biblical. So it's getting bad out there.
Yeah, I struggle sometimes. I can understand on one hand. On the other hand, I struggle with the language of demons living in a different dimension or realm, because I think they're here in this dimension, this realm, right? Absolutely. And I can understand where that semantic kind of comes in, though, when you kind of think of like, well, we can't always see them, but they might have a form, like we said, like Chris said, that they can hurt you, they can scratch you, things like that. It's just that kind of language sometimes can detach it again from reality, right? About whether it's actually real or not. Will we actually experience them if they're not in this realm of reality? But they are. Even the heavens, right? That we have a physical structure over our head that is given the name heaven in this reality, right? It's not in a different dimension necessarily, right. But I can understand why people can use that language because we can't access it, right? It's above a impenetrable dome. So,
and I've always heard pastors talk about Yahweh living in another dimension and all of that. I could never wrap my head around that when I was a child. But this guy took it further, and he's putting sci-fi as a part of it. Now, mind you, heliocentrism is science fiction, but he was literally putting an aspect of a popular TV show as theology, and that's when it starts to get weird, extra weird.
Yeah, it does. Well, while we are on the topic still of whether things are, things described in Scripture are really real, how real are they, right? Would you go back to that list, Sean, pull it up, of the topics of discussion? And while I pull this other thing up, if anybody else has anything to add, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I got something about the solar eclipse if you want me to throw it in the mix.
You got something on the solar eclipse?
Yeah.
What'd you have, brother?
So I want to paint the picture of just the ridiculousness of mainstream science's explanation for the solar eclipse. So they say that of course the moon goes in front of the sun to block it. So, and anybody at home can do a quick search online to fact check anything I'm about to share, because I'm just sharing what they say. I'm not saying it's true. So I'm just going to paint the picture and compare the sun to the moon. The sun has a diameter, again, this is what they say, diameter of 864,000 miles. The moon, 2,159.2 miles. Radius, I know that's a bad word. Sean ripped that up in one of his episodes. The sun
A
has a
radius.
radius of, do what now?
Sorry, a radius. Yeah.
Yeah. The sun has a radius of 432,687 miles. The moon, 1,760.6 miles. Of course, the sun is 93 million miles away. The moon has a distance of 250,000 miles, but somehow, magically, they perfectly line up and look exactly the same size during a solar eclipse. Right. Cool story, bro.
Yep. Cosmic coincidence, they say. It's just a coincidence. They do that.
Real quick, Chris,
Perfect
we
alignment.
appreciate you. I think Chris has to jump out of here right now, but we thank you for joining us tonight, brother.
You bet. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me. We'll see you guys
Good seeing you, brother.
tomorrow, and you guys can check us, me and Michael, Flat Out Insights. I believe you said tomorrow, 10 p.m., correct?
I have to look at the schedule. There's been some changes, but yes, tomorrow for sure.
Okay, we'll see you. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys.
See you,
Love you,
Chris.
dude.
Awesome,
Coming
man.
through. Later on. Good stuff.
All right, so I got a question.
Okay.
And I think this might be beneficial for some folks watching. So going back to the eclipse, if this was not the moon,
Mhm.
then I think some of the viewers may want to know, where is the moon during all this? And kind of part two of that question, does this have anything to do with the calendar?
Okay. Gotcha. So we hear from NASA, from the sources that feed us their information on the narrative that they want us to believe about the solar eclipse. They will tell you that the solar eclipse only ever happens when the phase of the moon is what they call the new moon, when that's a 0% illumination phase. And so it's not visible. They say you can't see the new moon until it comes in front of the sun. And then so we have to remember, though, that Scripture describes the moon as a light itself, and there's nothing in it except its light, as it says in Enoch, so that we can't then reimagine that to mean that, it's a opaque, solid object, right? And so then there's that aspect. You asked, repeat your first question about where is the moon?
Yeah,
So
where's the moon? Yeah.
Yeah, since it happens in the new moon phase, and that does typically correspond with when the moon is like closest in its transit in the circuit with the sun. I think Satan takes advantage of that understanding, and as part of the deception, he purposefully has it set up to where it eclipses when the new moon is invisible, so that people can think it's the moon. What are your thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, this is why no one's ever been able to capture the moon, like leading up to the eclipse.
Or leaving the scene thereof.
Or leaving the crime scene thereof, yeah. With the diamond, after the diamond ring was stolen, they never see it leaving the days after, and because it's going through its phase. And so it's not hard to do. And that's why I tried to show in part 20 of SDA Babylon the actual science involved in levitating something and putting it in orbit according to established, documented, and already spoken about science. Like, this is science that people can already do. It's doable. It's just, does anyone have the will or the finances to do it on the scale that is being proposed? And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense. If something would put into a type of orbit in the high altitude, it also makes sense, not just in the parallel of the phase of the new moon to reveal itself during that time, but also it's like a, how do I say this? It's like a it gives itself an excuse,
Like an alibi,
to not be seen any other times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's two. And then third would be the actual shadow casted on the ground does not cover half the earth. It's only about 80 miles wide, which is a huge problem for the globe earth model. Because if the sun, even from our perspective, if the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, and therefore to our perspective, the exact same size as the sun, then that means from our perspective, it should block out all the light of the sun as it's being cast across the entire earth and not just an 80-mile wide swath.
And furthermore, that's not how shadows work. Shadows are typically larger than the object that's cast the shadow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of problems with it. And this is why after I studied biblical cosmology to find out all the problems with the eclipse, that's where more and more I kept coming back to this idea. Okay, well, what if it's an object in the sky like all the ancient people talked about? That there was Rahu, is the decapitated head of the enemy, was in the sky. That there was something in the sky. There was this landmass that was the home of the gods that was in orbit. Basically, they didn't use that terminology because that's a modern term that we used from NASA type language, heliocentric type language. But they all testified to their gods living in the sky and on a piece of land. So did that help at all, Kyle?
I think so. I guess, the second part of that question, and lending to what you guys were talking about. I mean, we know that when we see the moon in various stages, you can actually see through a portion of it. You can see stars through the,
but not the sun.
Right, but not the sun. But any calendrical things to point to on that?
That's right.
Any significance to that?
I don't know that I have many thoughts on that. I know that they say that these solar eclipses happen in a cycle of 223 lunar months that they call a Saros cycle. And so there is a calendrical aspect to that, but I don't know that it marks anything on Yahweh's calendar necessarily, right? I don't see any correlation there. There is some interesting claims that have been made. Some of it can be somewhat conjecture, but specific solar eclipses seem to coincide closely with major events. Some of them try to make the correlation of the modern state of Israel and when it was formed and how there was a solar eclipse, therefore like soon before that and things like that. But I don't know what to make of it for sure. What do you think?
Well, that would be very coincidentally fitting for the Eye of Ra on the back of the dollar bill, which has the Latin phrase, "He favors our undertakings."
Mm-hmm.
If they, you had a solar eclipse at appropriate times, significant times for the enemy's plans, I should say, that would be very fitting. But also my idea about the moon itself, since no one can actually go up there and take a sample and test it, is to me, I do wonder that too, Kyle. Where does it go? Right? If it is just plasma that's charged up over the course of its phases and then wanes, it waxes and wanes, right? From what Enoch tells us, getting light being transferred to it over a course of many days in parts from the sun. And if that's the case, that sounds like plasma to me, and how a plasma source may work through the creation model. But also, if it's in a layer of the firmament, well, then if it's not lit up, if there's nothing exciting it in building it up, waxing it, then you wouldn't see it anyway. It just goes away during that time.
I think my best answer for where it goes is dark. It goes dark. Like a flashlight gets turned off. If it's 50 miles away, you can't see it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that I like what you joked about. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, I guess I must have thrown the mix about what it might be or not what it might be, but just info about that it's not the moon. So I know a brother that just throw his channel out there, George from GeoTruth. Me and him go back and forth. So I was going to ask a question / answer. Does anybody on the panel watch the pass of the sun and moon on Naval Observatory? Because he does religiously. And from his research, on October 14th was when the solar eclipse occurred, the moon was actually 45 miles below the sun during that time. So that's something that people can go look at and research themselves too. So another interesting nugget to prove that the moon is not. Yeah, and he totally believes that it was an object of Satan or Azazel blocking the sun during the eclipse. So something else interesting people can research.
I think about that kind of thing every year because in 2017, I heard that people who lived in Australia, and this is kind of hearsay for sure, but people who lived in Australia said that the moon was visible above where they are while the solar eclipse was happening over Illinois and that stretch over the United States. But I couldn't verify that. I heard it, and it just made sense to me to think, especially with what this guy's saying, that it wasn't right in front of the sun, that you could track it to be somewhere different. Fascinating stuff, guys. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for everybody's input. I wanted to talk about now, if you could go back to this slide with the discussion topic, Sean. Before we get too late in the broadcast and people start having to go, I wanted to look at what we have, biblical underworld, right? This was our, well, we did several episodes kind of on it because the underworld encompasses both Sheol, aka Hades. There's also Tartarus, the bottomless pit, also called Abaddon. And then, yeah, so you have these different compartments in this biblical underworld. And we were talking a minute ago about how real are these things that the Bible describes, right? Does the Father have a real body? Are demons able to really affect you physically? Things like that. And so if Sheol is a real place, how real are the souls of the dead that go there? And what is it like? What is the experience there? We have a lot of brothers that would believe and think that there is no experience whatsoever after death. And so I'm curious to hear some of y'all's thoughts on it. Who was about to speak?
Yeah, so the first thing that I would point out about this subject is, to me, it exposes a common cliche in Christianity, which is like, if you die, you either go to heaven or hell. And then when you actually read what the Bible says, you're like, okay, well, wait a second. When someone dies, they all descend below, according to the Bible. Everybody descends to Sheol. Even Yeshua, when he died, was said to have descended to Sheol for 3 days and 3 nights, right?
There you go.
And obviously that contrasts with heaven, which is where when you thought of heaven, it's just been some type of metaphysical thing that you could never really understand, or you always have like weird testimonies too. Back in like Christian TV, what am I thinking of? Like daytime TV type testimonies, visions of heaven, and that's what you have, right? But now it's like, well, wait a second. Heaven could be the place above the solid structure, right, which causes the pressure that the Earth has, because it's never been properly explained how the Earth's atmosphere could exist next to a vacuum.
Well, gravity.
Yeah, well, that's interesting subject, but if you want to go there, we can. But no, joking. So about the underworld, right? Just like the dichotomy, the first thing is like, well, whoa. All souls descend there as we await either the first resurrection or the second resurrection, right? And that's what it also talks about in the end of Revelation, where Sheol will give up her dead, right? So,
right, and that's not just the wicked, right? A lot of people think, oh, the wicked may still go to Sheol, and then the righteous, though, they're going straight to heaven these days, since Jesus set captive the captives. But yeah, while we're on the topic of Yeshua descending to Sheol, like you just mentioned, Michael, could you pull up the screen share that I got, please, Sean? This is an interesting find that I found in the Aramaic Peshitta, and so they say the Aramaic Peshitta is the.
I'm sorry, brother. I think it's called Peshitta.
Peshitta? Okay.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't say the bad word in between.
Okay.
Thank you.
No gracism.
No gracism.
Sorry about the gracism, guys.
The Peshitta here is it's said to be the world's oldest complete collection, including the Old and New Testament, that was preserved, that they still have available to them. So I knew about this passage in 1 Peter, but I didn't never see this translation until just recently. Because it says, because the Messiah also died once for the sake of our sins, the righteous one in the place of sinners, to bring you to God, and he died in body and lived in his spirit, and he preached to those souls who were held in Sheol. So I've heard of this concept before, but the other translations don't use the word Sheol there. As you know, that's a Hebrew word, but because this was translated from Aramaic, the translators decided to put that there instead of Hades. Or what else does it say, like in other modern translations? Does anybody know off the top of their head?
It says something about them being bound there, but also which he went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometimes were disobedient when once the long-suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was a preparing.
That's right. Yeah, it's the word prison that has been used in most modern English translations that is kind of ambiguous and doesn't give you the same connotation that Sheol does for those in the know about what that is, as these physical, subterranean, underground, cavernous, hollowed out places where the literal souls of the dead, the departed spirits, are awaiting, like Michael said, the resurrection. And so I find this most interesting because we also have Irenaeus in his book Against Heresies, book 4. He has a quote here. Can I get somebody else to read this?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
The early church figures said this about Christ's time with the souls of the dead in Sheol and Hades. For their benefit, he also descended into the lower parts of the earth, to behold with his eyes the state of those who were resting from their labors. It was for this reason, too, that the Lord descended into the regions beneath the earth, preaching his advent there also, and he declared the remission of sins received by those who believe in him. As Jeremiah declares, the Holy Lord remembered his dead Israel who slept in the land sepulchre, and he descended to them to make known to them his salvation that they may be saved. Irenaeus.
That's right. Thank you, brother. Yeah, so we got an early church figure, right? Some people say church fathers, but Irenaeus is, I hold him in a little higher esteem than some of the others because he is historically recorded to have been the direct disciple of Polycarp, and Polycarp was said to be the direct disciple of John, the Apostle John, who, as we know, was the apostle of Yeshua. So like 4th generation disciple there, 3rd generation, directly under Yeshua, but he had these things to say, and I like some of the terminology, the language, right? The land of sepulture, beneath the earth, the lower parts of the earth, regions beneath the earth, right? He descended there, and he affirms what we just read from the Peshitta version of 1 Peter 3 there, or 1 Peter, that says that he preached to souls in Sheol. And that's kind of what I've always felt like was right, like this idea of spirits in prison. But I had a lot of people in my other ear saying, no, that his thoughts, anybody who dies, their thoughts perish, right? We see that in, what is it, Psalms or Ecclesiastes. There's a couple verses that can be interpreted. Some people think that there is no experience, no level of consciousness, that there's no, you can't see anything, you can't talk to anybody. It's just complete sleep, like they think of in the living sense of sleep. But I'm curious to hear any other thoughts that you guys have on this idea.
Well, real quick, I think Michael Solomon and Matthew Beaver's got to jump off.
Did you guys,
brothers? We greatly appreciate y'all joining us tonight for this, and yeah, it's been a blessing to have y'all.
Absolutely. And you don't have to leave right this second if you had any thoughts you wanted to share before you leave, but you're welcome to take off if you need to. Thank you, guys.
Okay,
we appreciate you. You're loved.
Yes, bless y'all.
Shalom, guys.
Okay.
This stirred up a lot.
Actually, I do want to share.
Yeah. Oh, I think he's got a delay.
Can I share something real quick before I jump off, Wes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I want to share this earlier, but I just want to challenge anybody at home to. We talked about this earlier. Operate from a spirit of love when this topic comes up, because this is just like the Trinity. The globe is a super triggering topic, and if you come at somebody and say you globe-tard when they're not listening to what you have to say, you're not going to convert anybody to your understanding. So just operate from a spirit of love, because you have to remind yourself, show them mercy, because just like everybody on here, since by age of 5, we've all been programmed hundreds of thousands of times to believe a certain way about the shape of the earth. And just dropping a couple nuggets on somebody, they're not going to come to your side because of cognitive dissonance. Like, for instance, I'll share a personal story real quick and I jump off here. So I play pickleball. So Josh knows this. I don't know if I shared the story with him. So I met a actual pastor of a church, local church, and I ended up giving him one of the books me and Josh wrote, and had lengthy conversations with him at times. And I even hit him with one of the questions I wanted to ask people. It's a big one. I went up to him one day after we were done playing pickleball. I was like, okay, I got a question for you. And I've been wanting to ask people this for a long time. So in 1969, President Nixon, from a landline, called the boys 250,000 miles away on the moon. You believe that? He's like, it sounds legit to me. So, I mean, at that point, I'm like, okay, moving on. So if he ever brings it up again, that's cool. But I'm not gonna come at him because it's cognitive dissonance is heavy. So just remind yourself when you're talking to people about the cognitive dissonance and the lifetime of programming. So, and do it from a spirit of love. So I just want to to share that real quick and jump off here. Thanks for having me. Shalom from under all them domes.
That's
Good to
right,
see you,
Thank you,
brother.
Matthew.
Shalom to
Shalom,
you as
brother.
well.
Can't wait to see your footage.
It's a good reminder, guys. Yeah, got to operate in love.
That's right.
Yeah, Wes, if you wanted to ask that question one more time.
Sure. Just like what thoughts come to mind for any of you guys that may have believed or have heard at least that there is no experience whatsoever, no level of consciousness. You can't see anything or talk to anybody. A lot of people describe death as just this complete and total unconsciousness of sleep that until the resurrection. But then we have these descriptions of like the blood of Abel crying out, or in Luke 16, the rich man and Lazarus having this conversation with Abraham present, and they're across a chasm and they're describing all these things. And then you have things like this where Yeshua apparently
Revelation 6.
Revelation 6, the soul's under the altar, right? So you
Waiting
got
for their robes of righteousness.
there it is.
Yeah,
The scriptures seem to describe consistently some level of consciousness that we can't, completely define with every detail and tell you exactly what it looks like. There's no footage, there's no photographs of it. We even have Samuel, the prophet, being resurrected up, a disembodied spirit being resurrected to prophecy.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to almost pose a question. So, I remember reading often about the body when we die returns back to the earth and the soul returns back to the Father. So it's interesting to see what part of that split between the body, soul, and is there another thing in place there that is kind of holding that consciousness, or that's keeping that story alive while we're awaiting the resurrection? Because if we're looking at it as these two things split from each other, how do you guys see that playing out?
So the first thing that comes to mind is, I know, you said soul. The word is typically translated spirit. I know that it can be, interchangeable sometimes, depending on the context. We know that words can mean different things depending on the context. So when it says that the spirit returns to God who gives it at death, I understand that as to be just the breath of life that animates the body returns to God because it's his breath. But there is a soul, that's the language that's used in the English translations, at least. The nefesh is left over even after the body's decayed, and that breath of life that animated that body has returned to the Father. The soul is left. A dead soul is left in Sheol. A lot of people say, well, that can't be. A soul is when you combine the flesh and the spirit.
Right.
But these particular entities are referred to as dead souls, from what I gather. And so it would be different than a body of flesh, but that there's still a semblance of personhood. They still have their identity. They still have memories, because of we can see in the conversation in Luke 16 with the rich man talking about, I wish that you could send somebody to my brothers to tell him about the law and the prophets and remind him, of the severity of this situation. So he remembered that he had family. He was pleading to be able to have that interaction take place. But yeah, go ahead.
I think Ecclesiastes 9 verses 5 and 6 is one that's commonly used. Let me see if I can pull it up here.
Did we just lose Wes?
Uh-oh.
Hope my question wasn't too difficult.
Kyle, you can keep going.
Yeah, all right. Ecclesiastes 9:5 it starts off with, "For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything." And again, just reading this one passage here, that's a scripture that a lot of people will use for saying that the dead know nothing, right? So there's just kind of this obliviousness when they're dead. So there's that. And also maybe later on y'all can address, because there is the idea also that some have that at least part of Sheol, the good side, has been elevated to the heavenlies, at least to a portion of the heavenlies. So there's that concept as well for some people.
You've heard that claimed that Sheol itself has been removed from under the earth and put in the heavens?
Only the good side.
Not that people have been brought out of the good side and taken to the heavens, because I've heard that, but you're saying you've heard the habitation itself being
Yes, because they the understanding was that was the Garden of Eden, that the good side of Sheol was the Garden of Eden, and then it was taken up into the heavenlies. That was an understanding that I've heard before anyway.
I've heard him say paradise. I don't know that they made the connection that it was, the Garden of Eden that went down there, but they often call it paradise. Yeah. And
I think that's why the connection was
Mhm.
made there, because of that word. Yeah.
Because of the statement that surely today you shall be with me in paradise. He says, I tell you today you shall be. But the comma
You
was
almost had it right. They're both on the cross. Surely today you shall be paralyzed with me.
Yeah.
Like, did he say paradise or paralyzed?
Yeah. But
well, they didn't
even
go
the
to
thief on
paradise
the
that
cross,
day.
right? The thief on the cross said
He was just
already
killing that
a
day.
couple verses before that remember me when you come in your kingdom. And the rest of the context of the story says he comes in the kingdom, which is also called paradise, on the last day.
So I just wanted to sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
You're good.
So one of the ways that I've thought about this, trying to understand if the soul is still conscious, while it's being stored in Sheol, or, do you need some sort of a physical body in order to have consciousness, or et cetera, so I have to agree that it does seem to be hard to understand, without a doubt. And, I think that, hey, if we can build video games where all the character and what they do and all the items you buy and what you collect, everything's like recorded. I think I wouldn't be surprised if, the world being some sort of God's living code and how he created things, all the deeds done in the body are recorded. Could that be attached to your soul somehow? You contain your memories. It's like a part of who you are, I was just wondering. So I think in some ways hard to understand, sort of try and picture it out. But my last thought, though, separately, when you talked about the word Sheol and how I can't remember the specific name of the book, but they had just used Sheol instead of like calling it hell, etc. One thing that I always point out about these words is that Sheol, Sheol, that's English, right? If you're going to what you usually do is transliterate names and places in the Bible, right? Like the name of a place will be transliterated into a new language that just had different letters to make the same sound, right? And so to me, it's actually very telling when you start to learn why some of these words are chosen in order to try and describe to you what this is. Another example is like the word ecclesia being translated church. There was a guy, William Tyndale, who was strangled and burned alive as a heretic by the Catholic Church because, he translated the Bible into English.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like adamant that ecclesia should be assembly, right? Or like congregation, and not church. Why is that? Well, why do they use these words? Is that Sean also talks about in regards to the Trinity about how they chose the homoousia or the harmosius, right? Like, why did they choose that word to try and describe this concept? So there's actually a lot of injustice in the Bible with how certain names and places are transliterated. Really, they're substituted is the point. They remove it entirely and put something else in. It's the same thing versus like Sheol, Gehenna, right? Tartarus. When did they ever actually just transliterate it into English? They don't. So I actually think that's an underrated point, that these words actually may not even be correct. They're not, by nature of being a different word, they're not conveying what the writers intended. That's what I'm saying. So to me, that actually makes a lot of sense, and just wanted to share that too.
I feel like that's more applicable to the word hell that they've used, right? So that falls right in line with what you're saying. Were you saying that Sheol is English and not a Hebrew word? What are you saying the Hebrew word was?
Yeah, no. So Sheol is a Hebrew word,
okay,
but the way you transliterate that into English is Sheol. So it's pronounced the same, whether it's Sheol in Hebrew, Sheol in English. It's said the same, right?
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Cool.
Yeah, like why not put that there, Sheol? Why not put? No, they call it hell.
Well, in Matthew 10:28, instead of hell, it should be Gehenna, and this is what confuses so many people. Is that they think just hell is an all-encompassing term for anything after death that's not heaven. and that confuses so many people because of what Michael's saying, as far as not the translator is using generic terms and not specific terms, and so people get really confused with that one. That's why, I'm not going to be a Tyndale, but if I ever were to, it makes me wonder why so many people, when they choose to translate the book of Matthew, they use in that spot this generic word hell, as opposed to Gehenna, which is what it actually is. So, because hell is more commonly associated with Hades or Sheol, which is the underworld, and not the place of torment or the place of the lake of fire, which is Gehenna. So these words do have different definitions. And also, just another idea. Jonathan and Kyle, I don't know if those topics that you brought up, I don't know if we really delved into some of the scriptural rebuttals, if I could say. I always try to remind people that Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 5-9 is a comparison of things being done on the earth, activities on the earth. Yes. And therefore, once you die and your spirit goes back to God who gave it, there is no more activity. You're not going to have a job. You're not going to worry about what your friends and family are doing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Not in the same sense that you do in this normal life. Now, in the parable in Luke 16, 19-41, we see Yeshua teaching that there was a sense of emotional torment in Gehenna, or in Sheol, in the unrighteous side, because he didn't want his other family to come to where he was. He wanted them to believe the prophets. So that's the fascinating thing. And then you've got, someone in the comments stole a point that I was going to bring up, which is, kudos to them. I think I agree with him. I think it's a good point to bring up. In the book of John, chapter 1, it talks, or excuse me, chapter 1, or maybe chapter 6. It talks about how Christ is the only one who has ascended to heaven, is the one who came down. Yep. And that's the writer of John
3:13. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, John 3. Sorry, John. That's the writer of John speaking like 20 plus years after the ascension of Christ. So we have these theories, right, Kyle, that we do hear the church propagate, which is this idea that, when Christ resurrected, he brought all the righteous people out of Sheol with him, and they got their resurrection bodies, and they went up to heaven with them, even though the scriptures don't say that anywhere. In fact, the book of John, 20 plus years later, goes in and adds his commentary while describing Yeshua and says he's the only one who's ascended to heaven. Mm-hmm. So it's like little stuff like that, when you encounter this topic of what happens when you die, even after the ascension, or the death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. And I think that, to me, this is where understanding the resurrection and the promise of the resurrection on the last day, on the day of the last trumpet, the seventh trumpet, is so important. These big time qualifiers for when you get your glorified body, which that process of getting your glorified body happens when you're pulled out of your place of rest. So there is, I think Seventh-day Adventists teach that everyone now post the cross, everyone now dies and their soul goes to heaven, but they still haven't gotten their glorified body yet.
They don't teach that necessarily. No, they usually teach that it's just a soul sleep kind of thing, and it's that. They say the spirit goes to God who gave it, and the body decays, and then there's the resurrection. They agree that there's a resurrection. They just don't see Sheol as a real thing, a physical thing, that's a place under the earth. They don't agree with that part.
Well, I apologize.
They think it's just the grave.
I can't remember which denomination teaches that, unless it's just a wide variety of people I've talked to amongst Methodists, Baptists, Catholics.
Yeah, it depends which one you ask, I'm sure.
I think it does. I think it's that specific, right? As far as like which opinion of whomever you're talking to, they're claiming that, because I've definitely heard Baptist teachers say this before, that when you die, you go to heaven, but you haven't gotten your resurrection body yet. That's right. At the great day of resurrection, you get your actual body back. But between now and then, you're just your soul's just in heaven, enjoying heaven.
It's Seventh-day Adventists that believe that at the resurrection, everybody goes to heaven for the 1,000 years, and the millennial reign is spent in heaven, and earth is desolate. And Satan's contained to it, but we would say the millennial reign is on earth, that the kingdom.
That's right, down. Because they don't believe anything's on the earth during the millennial reign. They think the millennial reign is actually in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to what we're all here for, the biblical cosmology. I think understanding biblical cosmology lends so much to the understanding of these topics that's been so diluted and so all over the place for so many years. I think it's a super, super important understanding to have, to be able to really pin down a lot of these little things that might even be hangups for you. right? Even if you are reading in context, you might have that one little thing here or there that's like, I still can't get there, but that understanding that cosmology kind of gets you there, and recognizing those extra biblical texts, that lend to a wealth of information that's missed out on. So, yeah,
right.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah, because the Enoch 22 is instrumental in setting up the origin and the foundation, like the literal introduction to what Sheol even is. Because if you don't have Enoch, they're talking about Sheol, assuming by default that you already know what it is. Right. They're using it, and just there's no explanation and introduction for it. Yep. But it was in the book of Enoch the whole time. So that's absolutely right. We had also somebody in the chat, Octosis, mentioned, I forget where it is in Acts, and I want to say it's Paul that's using some apologetics for the Jews that knew about the psalmist prophecies when David was talking about Yeshua prophesying of the Messiah, and Paul in Acts is saying, but David is buried here in the tomb. We have his body here. He's not already achieved the promises, already received the promises of the resurrection, right? I think that lends to the idea that nobody's left Sheol yet, and nobody who's died. And then also Hebrews 11 to me is my go-to, where it shows that, all who have died are still awaiting the promises. And then at the end, it says that we will all together receive them at once, collectively, that promise of the resurrection happens for everybody at once, from, all the righteous, right, at once.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
From Sheol.
In 2 Timothy, it was warning people back then. There was people, because you think there's a lot of people now who say the resurrection's already happened and we're in the little season. But he was warning people in 2 Timothy that it says, by saying that our resurrection has already taken place, and they are overturning some people's faith. Nevertheless, then it talks about God's firm foundation. But yeah, it talks about people going around saying that it already happened. When the resurrection of Yeshua happened, like you guys were saying, they're actually preaching that back then, that it was happening. So, to warn people way back when that hey, the resurrection hasn't taken place yet. And I agree with Sean about the knowing nothing. But typically, when you go to a funeral, they're saying they're smiling down, watching you. They know everything. They don't know what's going on in your life. You don't need to talk to the dead. For one, that gets people talking to the dead. It's like, I know you're watching me, Mom. And like talking to the dead. So yeah, knowing they haven't resurrected yet. And I think it was Ken's video, Ken Heinebrich, on Hanging on His Words, that really got me diving into that topic. And he was using things like, when Jonah was in the whale's belly, and he says he cries out from Sheol. I'm like, wait, what?
He died.
He wasn't in there with a campfire like in the cartoons. What's going on? My childhood is ruined.
Given that whale indigestion.
Right.
Yeah, and to what you said about Timothy saying that those who have said the resurrection already came, and it upturns their faith, it messes with their faith, because what hope do we have? Because that is the blessed hope, the promise of that resurrection to come. If preterism is true, the kingdom already came, the resurrection already happened. Why are we preaching? What faith? What faith do we follow? What hope is there for us?
What's the point? Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Let's go storm that kingdom, that city.
And Josh, I want to share this very, very quickly, because I've shared it before, and it's such an interesting thing to me to consider, because it's a family member of mine. But like the prayer in Jonah 2 of Jonah possibly crying out from Sheol, and what we seem to, when we take it in context and we take it for what it says and the definitions of Sheol and everything involved, and okay, it's just like the rich man's crying out to Lazarus to go back to the land of the living and warn his family about the place and to accept the prophets. In the same way, my grandfather had a stroke and was in a coma for 3 days. And when he woke up, he claimed that he was in a bright place where his mother, who had already died, his friends who had already died. My granddad was like 72 at the time. So he had already experienced a lot of loss of friends and family. And he said he all saw them there. And there were angels everywhere. And there was a
spring of water.
There was a bright spring of water there, just like Enoch 22 describes. And they told him that he's not going to stay.
Your time isn't up.
So I'm like, he was in a coma for 3 days, having a vision, and so he claims. Now, my granddad had been a pastor all of his life, and he had already retired. And then after that, he started pastoring again because he was so on fire for God. Like, he was just quoting scripture constantly. And it was like, for a while, it was hard to have a normal conversation with him, because he was just, go into preaching mode immediately because he never had a vision like that. He never seen something like that before, and he was absolutely on fire as an older man. So I think about that, and I'm like, he described, and I had, when he told me that, I was 18 years old. I had not read Enoch yet at that point in my life. But now when I read Enoch and I put 2 and 2 together, I'm like, wow, he described what Enoch described, and I'm like, that's pretty amazing. Like, and these people were all waiting for the resurrection. They weren't in heaven, and there's angels there, just like Enoch describes, like guardians over this place. It's not, Satan's not the guardian over this place. It's good angels. And they communicated with him that you're not going to stay here. Like you're just kind of getting a glimpse, if you will, but you're not going to stay right now. You're going to go back, so to speak. And so, yes, I do believe Jonah could cry out from Sheol.
Yeah.
Because just in the same way that Jonah didn't know what was happening in the land of the living on the surface, in the same way, if my grandfather, I want to say this, I want to be very fair to this, if my grandfather's vision was true, the same way that the people, his mother specifically, and the angel that was with him told him that you're not going to stay here, there's this understanding, if you will, that the angel had already told my great grandmother, which would have been his mother, that he wasn't going to be staying. So she already knew this. She was a part of this conversation with him. And so, but she didn't know what was going on in the land of the living. But she was cognizant enough to know that they were all praising God, by the way. Like everyone involved, everyone that he could hear speak or move and talk, and like they were all praising God, and they all looked youthful. They didn't look like old, decrepit people. So it was interesting just to consider that. That's one anecdotal story. I know I'm not claiming it's scripture, but when I compare that anecdotal story to scripture, I see a lot of similarities. And I think it's fascinating that there is some sort of interaction. It seems as if scripture tells us this with different stories and parables, but they do not know who's the new president, what's going on with COVID, they don't know any of the things happening. You know what I mean? They don't know new babies being born in their genealogy, but they do know the promises. They do know something, and they can somehow interact with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do they know these things that they might not have known in their mortal life, but now they do in Sheol? Like what's promised for the righteous, what's the judgment that's coming for the unrighteous. It makes me think of that passage in 2nd Ezra 7 that isn't in all the manuscripts of 2nd Ezra's, where it describes basically a briefing that, like, there's a 7-day period after you die where you get briefed on all the things you might not have been aware of, or whatever the case. And Sean, you and I have talked about that before. It was a long time ago I asked you about that, and you felt like at that time that there wasn't a lot of evidence for that, all that it was saying in other passages. Since then, I've found evidence. I don't have it all pulled up now, but I found evidence that suggests that it was in the oldest manuscripts, and then it was cut out. Cool. Yeah, that it was cut out and like disregarded in the newer ones. But that it makes me think. It makes me wonder if it's true, because I don't know for sure. I accept 2nd Esdras, but there's always the parts that you have to wonder about. That, like, was it cut out for a reason? Was it a good reason? Things like that.
Why do they focus on that specific thing to leave out of other manuscripts? There's always the questions I have is like, okay, so if it was contentious, or if it was spurious, meaning added later, or someone claimed they didn't like it, why that specific part? Because, I mean, why didn't they do that to Baruch's epistles? Why didn't they do that to Isaiah? Why didn't they, what I'm saying? It's just like, I get those questions always pop up, like, why'd they target that one? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really weird. Now, because especially 2nd Esdras, I'm like, goodness grief. Chapter 2, talk about gospel of the kingdom. Like, you're going to get the kingdom that's been prepared for Israel. Here's the Son of Man crowning people with crowns and robes of white and palm branches. Like, bro, it's the most blatant validation to what the other prophets talk about. But it says it in such specific language that you can't be confused by it. It's not something that people would have to go out of the way to reinterpret it, is what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in like Isaiah, when I pull up Isaiah 26:19-21, you got to know context to really understand that. You know what I'm saying? That? And I teach on it because I try to help people understand the context, paralleling it with 1 Thessalonians 4 and other places, Matthew 29. But 2nd Esdras, man, it's just straight to the point.
Exactly. That to me lends credibility to, or at least a reasoning excuse for why they would have wanted to excommunicate these books and, you know, keep them out of the canons for the layman to read or whatever the case, just because they so clearly and directly, succinctly to the point will clear up some things that people have to, like you said, have to try to piece together based on the books that are in their canon. Whereas if they had this, it would tell them directly, there'd be no question about it. There's several, you know, lots of concepts like that between Enoch and Second Esdras and Jubilees.
And Second Esdras is, by the way, the very book that claims there's more books than 66.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
and
yeah,
there's
it's
different
like
manuscripts on that. One of them says 90 something, right? One of them
right,
said 160.
204. Yeah,
Isn't First and Second Esdras the last half of the book of Esther in the Bible?
No,
No.
it used to be a part of the what was called the Deuterocanon by one of the popes, and then it became known to most English Bibles as the Apocrypha in the back of the Bible. And then it was just around the late 19th century, new publishers just started printing new Bibles without the Apocrypha altogether.
Right. You may be thinking of like Nehemiah and First Ezra. I want to say First Ezra repeats a lot of the same concepts that you find in the regular book of Ezra and Nehemiah, because it's kind of like the book of Kings and Samuel that just they'll repeat a lot of the same events just from a different perspective.
So, Michael, what I've heard people say in the past is that certain collections of canons in history, like in the Greek, and I could be wrong if I misquote, it's either Greek or the Syriac, they took Ezra and Nehemiah, and they would call that First and Second Ezra, and then they took Third and Fourth Ezra, and that's what became what we know as like Second Esdras.
Okay.
Which the word Esdras is from the Greek. It's a transliteration from the Greek anyway. And so it gets weird because like they have different, the way they chop the books up is different.
Yeah.
And then they started giving them different names over time. So I grant you, it gets confusing.
Andrew Leclerc, brother, we have not heard much from you tonight. Doing all right down there? You got any thoughts, brother?
I'm just listening to good conversation. I'm trying not to insert myself here because you guys are doing a fine job without me. So I've just kicked back. I got my feet up now. So
cool.
Keep going.
Relax. Chill out with us. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I'm a little bit past my testimony for my understanding of biblical cosmology now, but one of the things that you didn't mention, and I'm no expert in this arena for by any means, but one of the things that really made me start to even dig into this at all was just questioning it's funny, but NASA, right? And I didn't really hold NASA in any high regard at all, but to think that there was this whole like institution that spends billions and trillions of dollars to sell the world this view of the earth, and then you find out they've lied about so much. Like your episode on the Challenger, I watched that with my wife, and I was like, no way, these people are not still alive. But the evidence was there, and then you start talking around with people just at work and stuff, and you're like, what do you guys think about the Challenger? And they're like, yeah, it was quite the devastating event and whatnot. I'm like, did you know they're still alive? And they'd be like, no, they're not. And I'd be like, yeah, check this out, and stuff. So it's just interesting to see how many people just actually don't know these things, and it blew my mind to think that how much is really put into this. Like, why do they want us to believe this so bad? What is it that is like that they're so about us believing this? So that's what really made me dig into that. And then I started questioning things like you guys mentioned earlier about Joshua and stopping the sun and whatnot, and why didn't he just say stop the earth? And then you go and ask other Christians what they think about this, and they're like, oh, well, he's just accommodating their understanding of what they're seeing, right? He didn't have the time or whatever to give them the understanding that all these things are happening, right? So and then I'm like, wait, so it's just not, it doesn't have a literal application then. It's just, he's just accommodating his understanding. He doesn't really understand, you get into all that stuff. So that's up my alley. I like literal applications. I don't like metaphors. But yeah, that was the trail that I went down. But I'm not I didn't fully engulf myself into this, but I entertain it. That's about where I'm at. But I also know that there's so many Christians where you can't even have this conversation. Like, what if everything you've ever been taught was completely false concerning the heliocentric motto and, the space and everything? What if that was all a lie? And they don't even want to entertain that. And then you have people who will laugh at you that you believe the Bible, and then, they're sitting there reading about the planets, and every page has a Neil deGrasse Tyson tweet in it, and they think that's where they get their science from. And it's like, well, you're making fun of me for reading an ancient document that is talking about things that prove to be supernatural in origin, but you're reading Neil deGrasse Tyson tweets for your science. So that's about
pretending that it's not a religion that they have blind faith in. Right.
Correct. Correct.
I appreciate you saying that about the Challenger episode. That means a lot to me, bro.
Yeah, here's something about the Challenger. This was from my classroom. This used to be on my wall in my classroom. This is part of the poster, the Challenger poster. Yeah.
You got a trophy?
So what does it say? Is it like, look at this great group of people
every day? It'd be really sad. Like I would be eating lunch and looking at it and going, those poor teachers, they were teachers like me.
At least one of them was, huh?
This was one of the hoaxes I was glad was like a hoax. I was like, oh, thank goodness. I spent all these days being sad about this. But yeah, it says that shuttle program pointed a new direction for space travel, one that might prove commercially profitable and help pay. Yeah, they were going to start making it commercial because they're sending a teacher, pay the enormous cost incurred in staging a shuttle launch. They were staging it. They just told us right here they were staging it. Yeah, that's crazy. All those people there and their twins. Their twins are still alive today.
Yeah, right. Too many of them got twins.
That would have been such more of a tragic story if they'd have got their twins involved back then. If they'd have been like, all their twins are grieving now, and then like had them all crying themselves. It's genius.
What I find interesting is why would NASA work with the people that claim to be the twins? Like, it just seems too much propaganda. Seems like propaganda.
That was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Good, you fooled us because we all believed it. How many people cried over that, except for the dad? That was my first clue, watching the film, and the dad is like smiling as it blows up. I'm like, why is the dad smiling? And this is before I realized everything. I'm like, what's going on? Why did somebody show me this footage? This dad's evil. Like, maybe he knew.
Yeah, and this really reminds me of what Jeremiah Skiba and Jake Grant were talking about at the very first presentation that we had for the conference, as they were talking about how this victim mentality, they latch a hook into people with something emotional so that they can then sell them the propaganda after they got them emotionally invested. And that was exactly what they were doing there.
Genius.
Yeah, liars lie for control of some kind. So why do they want to control? What are they trying to control? I think it's never been more clear to me that they absolutely want to control people's minds to think that this is all purposelessness and there's no God involved. And don't believe the Bible because it tells you the opposite of everything we're saying. They said, right? NASA and the cult institutions want to control that aspect more than anything.
Yeah, that aspect was really one thing that got me as well, is that really the whole basis for the heliocentric model is to prove to the world how small and insignificant you really are, right? And then how could there, in this vast universe, how could there ever, be a God? Where is he? Where is this God? And if he's out there, he's just this mist, this spiritual being, that we can't ultimately, he has no shape, no body, right?
Yeah.
But everything ties in.
And throughout all history, I mean, any ancient society that you can think of used supposed knowledge about the heavens to influence their populace. I mean, whether it's the Egyptians, the Romans, the Aztecs, like they all had a cosmology, knowledge of space or what you believe it is has always been used to influence the masses, right? In fact, some of that even lives on today because many of the planets got their names from Roman gods. It's actually lasted for thousands of years. So like Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, Mars, the Romans named them thousands of years ago, and those names stuck. They still live on today, right? So I'm just saying it's actually no different. It's not that weird. It wouldn't be like out of place for another government to be selling a story of what's going on in the heavens to lead people, in this case, astray. So it's not even that weird.
I heard recently, I can't remember where it was, but somebody pointed out something that I didn't realize completely. I kind of knew it, but I didn't get what they were going for, is that, all the so-called planets named after the Roman gods, like you said, but then like their moons, you know how some of them have multiple moons, they're named after the Greek counterparts to that Roman god, or characters in the Greek pantheon that were associated with that Roman god. So they got intricate with it, didn't they?
Oh yeah,
they sure did.
And it works. It works, man. Can you remember being a kid looking at a photo of space and you're just like, oh, wow. Yeah. Even as like a believer, you're just like praising God. And then one day you realize that this was actually developed by a group of, artists. What?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Andrew, to your point earlier about, feeling small and insignificant, you look at how big space is and the numbers that they attach to it and how many millions and billions of miles away things are. And if the Father is outside of that, if he's so far past any of even availability to get a rocket ship there, he's just impossibly far away, then it makes it look like he doesn't care. He's not interested in the affairs of our world. And if you have to really contend with, if he's just right up there, then he's like, hey, I'm watching, I'm paying attention, I care about even the small things. And the way that science model sets it up, it's just infinitely far away, almost as if he couldn't interact, even if he wanted to.
Right. Let alone have a plan and a purpose for you, or even love you. Right. Crazy.
And, the psychology behind it gives that power to men. Because, right, if you're in an enclosed structure designed by God, you do have all those things: purpose, meaning, value. Your rights come from God. That's what the Constitution says, right? But if you are, in fact, on some spinning, wobbling rock flying through infinite outer space and no one's in charge, rights, therefore, a subjective thing that come from the next highest thing, which is men, right? So I think if you can deceive people and believing that there's no God, you make man God. And then that's when all hell starts to break loose, right? You get tyranny, oppression, both in like a physical and a spiritual sense. So I think it's really linked. They're both linked.
It really is. Brothers, we have had a great episode. I've really enjoyed this. There's been a lot of fiery discussion and enjoyable stuff. I think we're coming to pretty close to the close. So I'd love to hear any closing thoughts anybody's had. Anything that you meant to say earlier, even though it's out of the context now, you're welcome to throw it in, bring it up, or say your goodbyes, however you'd like to.
Yeah, I just want to go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
You sure? Okay. This topic has been biblical cosmology has been a blessing to me in several friendships. I've got a buddy of mine. Obviously, I'm not going to state his name, but I've got a buddy of mine who, for the majority of his life, has intentionally avoided anything related to faith. He's been very angry with God because of things that happened early on in his life. And so the discussion was never on the table. It would never be allowed to be on the table. And, I'm always going to try in some way to bring stuff up, and we had a conversation one day, and I don't know what pushed me to say this, but I was like, yeah, I got an idea. I made a comment about flat Earth, and he made a little jest comment about it. And so I tell you what, if I can convince you that the Earth is flat, can we then actually have a legitimate conversation about God, where you listen, I listen, we discuss, and we go through it? And he's like, yeah, I'll take that. Sure. Okay. And he thought it was a solid 100% deal. Right.
Right.
A little over a year later, he starts talking to me about flat Earth and things like that. So we've begun our conversations about God, and it's been a blessing. So for some people to think that this is not a matter of salvation, I guess that all depends on who you're talking to.
Really, though. Yeah. I can say with certainty, like I've said before, that I had that mustard seed of faith. I had just about abandoned it through those teenage and later teenage years. But then God knew exactly what I needed. The Creator knew that His creation, the truth of it, is what I needed to grab my attention and get me back to the faith, and He used that as the stepping stone. So yeah, I cringe when I see those memes that say, "Oh, everybody that's awake is going to be awake, and everybody that's not awake, there's no hope for them anymore." Things like that. That idea that you're never going to be able to reach anybody, because, like you said, even though it took a year, even though with Matthew Jansen it took 4 years, there people are being reached with the truth.
That's right.
They need time sometimes. Thank you, Kyle.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here, man.
I just wanted to just throw this out there because we didn't stick to this topic earlier, but something that Wes had said, it reminded me of something that I did not harp on in my Investigating Babylon series that I regret. I feel like I should have harped on it a little more. And when I was talking about the eclipses themselves, that NASA has a guy that his name was Mr. Eclipse. That was his nickname.
Mm-hmm.
And so NASA has a specific guy, and his name is Fred Spinack or something like that. And he's retired now, but for several decades, he was the guy that predicted all the eclipses and has going forward predicted all the eclipses too. But when you look into like where did he get these ideas for the geometry and the triangulation of him predicting this stuff? It's what WesBlaze had brought up earlier, is the Saros cycle that goes back to ancient Babylon. It's an ancient Chaldean Babylonian prediction of the sun, moon, and stars triangulation. And they even have a deeper, longer Saros cycle than just the moon itself. And what's so fascinating about it is just that for a long time, it's just one guy. But it's like the office of Mr. Eclipse, the Mr. Predictor of the eclipses. It's not, they all still, when you really trace what they say, it goes back to like, there was a guy that was using this same type of ancient Babylonian method from the 1600s. I can't remember his name right now. They all have this same, it's like just passing down the teaching to a new pupil every generation, and you're now Mr. Eclipse. But it's not about the three body, it's not like they're solving a three body problem of a heliocentric model with the sun, moon, and star, or the sun, moon, and the earth. It's simply going off an ancient astronomical record, which back then it wasn't this sterile term of astronomy. It was astrology. The movements of the bodies of the heavens was tied to worship of their gods.
Yeah.
So this eclipse prediction concept is literally them trying to track the thing that causes the eclipse. And they trace it all the way back to ancient Babylon. Think about that. And if it's not the moon they're tracking, what are they tracking? And we start to wonder why they make such a big deal about it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't track stellanilions.
Yeah.
They don't track lunar eclipses, do they? I mean, they do. Let's be honest, they do. But they don't publicize them. They don't have every TV station telling schools to let kids out of school that day to watch them. Like they could care less about lunar eclipses because they can't explain them, for one, but two, they can't. There's not even a plausible way to explain them. And then also you've got the disruptors of the stellanilions that happen from time to time. But they track, publicize, and indoctrinate with the solar eclipse idea. And I think it's very interesting because there's literally just each generation they pass it down to a new singular guy. And you're like, why does this guy get to be the guy that gets to predict all the eclipses? And why do they? What's going on here? So I mean, this is the same guy who worked for Goddard with NASA, and it's I guess I'm just trying to say, guys, like, because there's people in the audience that do not believe in biblical cosmology, and that's fine. Everyone, we're not saying you have to believe this. We're trying to put forward evidences from Scripture, from observation, and from like public record, like that. It's not what they've told us, guys. It is not what they told us. So it is literally just an ancient religion packaged. This is what we're trying to put forward. So that's all I want to say.
Well said, bro.
Yeah, well said. And it reminds me of a verse that everybody's familiar with about wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against those powers of darkness. And when you look up that word powers, it's cosmic powers. And when you look up the word cosmic powers, it says controlling the sublunary world. And when you look up what the sublunary world is, It says it is the region of the geocentric cosmos below the moon. And so, AKA below the firmament. You know, so they're trying to control all the elements. It says earth, water, air, and fire.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Cosmos
Kratos. That verse in the interlinear, and that's what it pulls up. So,
and a lot of translations follow that up by saying in the heavenly places or in the heavenly realms. And it makes you think, why is there evil in heaven?
Right.
But then you realize that that word heaven can sometimes mean just the sky, the space between the firmament and the earth.
Yeah, it literally says it's a geocentric cosmos or the
and I'm not going to, keep going, but there was one little point that I tried to talk about in one of my 42 series, that the Egyptians would track Hathor or Isis, the female personification of the Eye of Ra, of the home of Satan. They would track that because when it would come through, it would create an inundation in the Nile so that they would have good crops that year. It was like an agricultural blessing whenever this thing came through in a certain way. And so I just think that they were obsessed with this idea, and we're getting the same obsession presented to us in a different format in the modern day.
Yeah. Shadow bands would make them dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, they celebrate it. Something crazy. I saw some people paying $400 to $600 for a camping spot just to go and fellowship in celebration of the solar eclipse. It was nuts.
Well, yeah, they even let certain people go up at high altitude, 33,000 feet, and have photographers take up an airplane window to try to capture them from the air. And I'm just like, they've done that a few times, 2015, 2017, and I don't know if they did it for last year, but they did it a few times. And it's just, you literally can see the small shadow going across the tops of the clouds, and it's just like, what are they make such a big deal about it. It's just, to me, it's a highly suspicious, very suspicious. Don't you find that suspicious?
Yeah. Well, India, as you know, we saw their proof. They landed on the moon. I don't know why they didn't turn that camera around to watch the eclipse, like shadow.
They didn't render that part of the cartoon, unfortunately. They just didn't have the animators.
And for everyone out there, we got a few very angry people contact us when we mentioned India's fake moon rover thing, and they were saying those were just, they admitted those, they were mad because I was jesting at India's true claim. India tries to claim truthfully that they sent something to outer space, to the moon, and people were mad at me and were trying to email me and talk to me saying, oh no, you're wrong, for you're slandering the Indian government and the Indian space program, because they admitted that these are just composites to represent what their lunar rover did when it landed on the moon. And I'm sitting there saying the entire claim is a lie. If they're using a model in a warehouse, or if they're using a digital composite, or if they claim to have live footage, all of it is a lie.
And if you look hard enough, they almost always will tell you that it's a composite or a graphic to represent, right?
Yeah. And so I just think it's wild. Like, this is deep within people. And this, by the way, these were Christians that were mad at me for even jesting about this, that for even putting forward publicly that I doubt India's truthfulness in their space program. Like, these are fellow Christians that were extremely upset that I would do that. And I'm like, man, they must not have known me very long.
Yeah.
they must not have seen uncommon ground before. And but ultimately the indoctrination is real. And I just would say that we have to, be very patient with folks, because people are not ready, man. Some people are just not ready. They got family that work for these agencies. They got money invested in, like you said, Josh, driving across country to go see these. They've told their kids. They've probably, one of my science fair projects when I was like 8 years old was to build a model of the solar system. So my parents are helping me with little styrofoam balls, hanging them from little puppetry type things in order to make them spin. You know what I mean? So a lot of these parents are invested with their children. You guys know how it goes in public schools. One of the first worksheets these kids bring home is something to do with the heliocentric model. Mm-hmm. Name all the planets in the solar system.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like, that's like first grade.
Yeah.
So it's deep it's an emotional tie for a lot of people. And I just pray that people hear what we're trying to put forward and know that we do it with a sincere heart. We're not we're not doing this to cause any unnecessary disruption. But unfortunately, when you put forward what God has plainly said this whole time, and there's lies that have been out there that contradict what God has said, it's going to be a disruption.
People why the truth divides.
It does. Yeah. People have to make a choice at some point. Who do you want to believe? Do you want to believe these people that openly admit to not being truthful with you and then openly tell you that they're misusing the money they take from you by force? Or do you want to believe the creator of heaven and earth who promises to give you eternal life and says he loves you and wants what's best for you? And doesn't actually ask for your money. So he's not showing up with guns saying, you should pay me.
Right. There's no imprisonment for failure to go to the temple and bring your tithe when there was a standing earthly temple, right?
No.
But
so anyway, I'll stop ranting. But you guys have been a blessing tonight. I hope that this show helps people understand some of the topics we broached. I hope that you guys are blessed by it. You get a little bit of if you never heard these things before, maybe you go research them. WesBlazeMuziK, his channel, guys, it's should be in the video description, and it's also going to be in our recommended channels on Kingdom in Context here. You'll probably see this video replay on his channel later as well, but check out the playlists for season 1 and season 2 of Uncommon Ground, and you'll hopefully you'll be super blessed by it. Get to know your creator better and what he made, where he made you, and all the scriptures that go with it.
Thank you, brother. Very well said. Yeah, if one of the mods could drop a link in the chat to the playlist for Uncommon Ground, that'd be cool. But otherwise, Andrew LeClaire, you're appreciated, brother. Thank you for coming through.
Thanks for the invite, man.
Media. Yeah, absolutely. Michael Tipperado, thank you, bro. Love you, dude. Love all you guys. Man. Jonathan, Kyle, Anchored to Truth brothers.
God bless.
Y'all are awesome for joining us. And last but not least, Mr. Josh Keefe. You're muted, bro. Founded Earth Brothers in the house. Were you going to say something, Josh?
Oh, sorry. It's been a blessing. Sorry, I forgot I muted myself. My wife came in and said, it's time for bed.
Yeah. Likewise, brother. Blessed as well. And Sean, thank you kindly for everything you do, brother. Thank you for having me. This is an awesome conference. So excited to see everything left. Do we have a song? Do we have time to run that song?
Sure. Yeah, we do.
Okay. Yeah, Mike Maranatha had dropped a brand new song today. I think he premiered it just before this episode here came out. And so it's actually something we've talked about tonight, which is Mind Control. And that's the name of Mike Maranatha's new song. Be on the lookout. By the time this weekend is over, you're going to have heard a couple new ones from Mike Maranatha. We should be able to get some new music played. I look forward to it. I got one with Bobby Thorns and J.O. coming out. It's called Zion. Really excited about that. Me and Mike have one called Shabbat Shalom. That's going to be awesome. I can't wait for y'all to hear it. But guys, thank y'all for coming out. Thank y'all for hearing us out. And bless the Father. May he bless you. Shalom from under all 7 of the domes. Y'all have a good one. Much love.
They don't got control over your mind no more. They don't got control over my mind no more. They don't got control over our minds no more. Let them know, yeah, we ain't under their control. Yeah, we ain't under their control. We ain't under their control. Yeah, we ain't under their control. Open up your eyes, we gon' have to fight. Are you down to ride? Can't take us alive. Open up your eyes, we gon' have to fight. Are you down to ride? Can't take us alive, yeah. Been trying to take us down, yeah, but we ain't going down yet. It's about to go down, yeah, when our God come around, yeah, yeah. They don't got control over your mind no more. They don't got control over my mind no more. They don't got control over our minds no more. Let them know, yeah, we ain't under their control. Yeah, we ain't under their control. We ain't under their control. Yeah, we ain't under their control. Tell me, are you down to ride? We'll fight all through the night. you. Now's the time, pick a side, or they'll pick a side for you. Join the crew, be the few for the truth, pushing through. They've been trying to take us down, yeah, but we ain't going down yet. It's about to go down, yeah, when our God come around, yeah, yeah. They don't get control over your mind no more. They don't get control over my mind no more. They don't get control over our minds no more. Let them know, yeah, we ain't under their control. Yeah, we ain't under their control. We ain't under their control. Yeah, we ain't under their control. They've been trying to take us down, yeah, but we ain't going down yet. It's about to go down, yeah, when our God come around, yeah, yeah. Tell me, are you down?